When class ends, Yahello slips out early and immediately feels something is wrong on the hill road outside campus. The emptiness gets worse as he reaches the school entrance and realizes the whole area is deserted. He runs past a convenience store and sees a half-finished meal, scattered utensils, and people gone in an instant. He spots crashed cars, leaking fuel, and sudden explosions, then scrambles away from the danger. At a bus stop, he tries to calm himself and head home, but the bus never comes. Running on raw determination, he realizes this is too strange to be normal and starts wondering if he has been left behind in another world. He finally gives up on waiting and walks home on foot, shouting into the empty world for anyone to answer. Back home, he finds his mother and father gone too, and every clock, phone, and screen has stopped. He confirms that only water and gas still work, showers, cooks instant noodles, and eats in lonely silence. Full but devastated, he goes to bed hoping sleep might change something. A beautiful winged angel suddenly appears in his room and bluntly tells him he has been left behind. The angel explains that Earth is about to level up, mana will appear, and humanity has been sent to other worlds to survive it. When he asks what mana means, she explains that monsters will appear, guns and even nukes won't be enough, and humans need to adapt or die. Yahello realizes the impossible truth: every human was moved, and he alone was excluded because of a mistake. She tries to soften the blow by offering a rejector bonus, frozen time, and a 10-year adaptation period, but he only wants to be sent away too. When she says Earth will supply him with meals and that he can only wait, he starts forcing himself to accept the situation. He asks why he was the one person left behind, and the angel answers that God could not even find his name. After waking up, Yahello finds the angel's breakfast steaming on the table, and quietly admits it tastes better than his mother's cooking. When the dishes vanish on their own, he realizes even cleanup is being handled for him and starts to get ready to leave for college. He stops halfway through getting dressed for college and decides the only useful thing left is to train his body for the coming disaster. He spends half a day studying how to work out, eats the lunch left for him, and heads to the neighborhood gym full of machines. For 3 straight years, he keeps returning to the gym every day, and even the angel is shocked by how stubborn he is. After 5 more years, he asks for martial arts training, and Erta tells him to learn Veil Tudo and spear basics from videos because there is no one else to teach him. He accepts her advice and pushes through the lonely routine, telling himself he only has to endure 5 more years. At first he struggles with both arts, but repeated practice slowly turns the spear motions and practical fighting drills into real skill. 8 years in, even Erta is startled by how battle-ready his body has become from nothing but training. By the 9th year, he is desperate for a real opponent, and Erta volunteers herself as the one person he can finally hit. He charges in with all his resentment, only to get beaten badly by the angel, who proves she is the perfect Veil Tudo opponent. The fighting only makes him stronger, and by the end of the promised 10 years he is a built, sharp-eyed man who can face low-class monsters. Erta explains that low-class monsters can be killed with ordinary weapons, which makes Yahello explode over being tricked for years. His anger fades when he realizes she was trying to help him survive, and he starts to understand that ordinary college life is already gone. At the promised time, they meet on the empty college grass square to say goodbye, and Yahello thanks Erta for everything. Erta introduces herself as Rita, admits she enjoyed the 10 years too, and rises into the sky as Earth's time is supposed to start again. Nothing happens when the time should resume, and Rita comes back down in panic to admit there was a mistake in the time axis. She casually says he may need to wait 10 or 20 more years, and Yahello loses it all over again. Time keeps not returning, and after decades of waiting, training, and wandering, he stops counting altogether. Years later, he still keeps training, and Rita grows even more anxious as she watches him refuse to waste the time he has been given. He says he can no longer remember his mother's face, and Rita can only apologize because the two of them have spent so long together. Fed up with only training, he decides to read instead, and Rita approves of the new idea. He throws himself into the college library, splitting his days between martial arts practice and devouring every book he can find. He burns through novels, major textbooks, and then the whole library's collection, because reading is now the only new thing left to conquer. When the local books run out, he decides to learn another language and leaves for China with Rita handling his meals along the way. Across China and then the rest of Asia, he keeps collecting books, logs, and languages until even Rita can barely keep up. By the time he finishes Asia and realizes the world still has not moved on, he heads toward Europe with even more hunger for information. Decades later, he celebrates finishing every book available to humanity in Boston Public Library, and immediately asks what comes next. He admits martial arts alone are no longer enough, and Rita is overwhelmed by how far he has kept pushing himself without losing hope. When Rita suddenly storms off, he decides to go home first, and the chapter closes on the shocking truth that an angel has started caring about him in a way even he does not notice. Alone in Seoul, Yahello throws himself into fantasy novels and starts studying everything he might need for the world after monsters appear. When Rita objects to his endless study, Yahello calmly decides to start with corpse disassembly before smithing. He spends decades hunting and disassembling animals until he can judge how to process even unfamiliar creatures by sight. Rita tries to stop him from hunting a sperm whale, but Yahello insists on finishing the last disassembly target. After waiting a month for the whale, he hunts it instantly, and Rita explains that some monster materials can be traded for huge value. At the 300-year mark, Yahello starts smithing, and Rita watches him struggle through the furnace, bellows, and hammering from scratch. 5 years later he finally makes a barely decent sword, only for Rita to mock it as barely able to slice a radish. Over the next decades, his smithing slowly improves until he can forge weapons and armor that surpass factory-made gear. After more than 2 centuries, Yahello forges a steel spear so strong and sharp that even Rita is stunned by it. By year 507, he pauses to ask what comes next, and Rita pushes him back toward martial arts because the great cataclysm still has not arrived. He dives back into spear training, then later realizes 3 days have passed instead of 3 hours, so Rita starts feeding him one huge meal a day. 2 centuries more of mixed weapons and martial arts push his body beyond its limit, reshaping him into a leaner, more efficient fighter. Rita grows restless at his endless single-minded training and starts thinking about using a more personal kind of stimulation to keep him from breaking down. Before she can act on that plan, exactly 1,000 years pass and the world finally resets, bringing humanity back. The first sign of the reset is Yahello noticing movement in his old sword, the street, and even his own body as time starts flowing again. Yahello is dragged back to the college campus by the world's own force, while Rita is pulled away into the sky still clutching the worthless old sword. Landing alone, Yahello realizes he wants to meet Rita again and resolves to become a higher existence so he can stand beside her. He waits through the world's restoration, feeling mana awaken in his body and noticing that the long years of training have already changed him. When he opens his eyes, the campus is packed with returnees, but they all talk to one another and somehow still do not notice him. Remembering his lifelong talent for being left out, Yahello accepts that even his long-awaited return is being erased by his own presence. He gives up on getting noticed, leaves the campus, and heads home on foot while the others celebrate the return. On the way home, he decides he will outrun everyone else, then opens his status and finally sees his jobless level 1 sheet with concealment at max. Yahello freezes at the status window, furious that his hidden skills and mocking title have been exposed. He realizes the Akashic records may have missed everything he learned during the long frozen years on Earth. He goes inside expecting a shower and a quick check of his new powers, but he stops cold when he sees his mother in the house. The long-delayed reunion hits both of them at once, and he hugs her hard as they break down crying. When his father arrives, the family settles into a long-awaited dinner, and his mother starts cooking with practiced calm. Over dinner, his parents swap stories about being sent to other worlds and how brutal those 10 years were. Yahello almost slips and reveals too much, then quickly covers it up when his parents turn to look at him. He admits he cannot use mana, and his parents accept it so naturally that he ends up discouraged instead. His parents keep chatting about monster corpses, government news, and work, while he realizes he still feels like a loner at home. He leaves the living room and heads to his room to research the situation online, expecting a normal night of information gathering. Instead, he finds his wrapped steel spear lying in the middle of his room, exactly where it should not be. He hides the spear in his closet, then the Akashic records suddenly identify it as a unique masterpiece with terrifying attack power. After that surprise, he turns to the internet to sort out the new world by the most objective facts he can find. He spends hours filtering lies from useful information and builds a rough picture of levels, jobs, and monster hunting power. The government says daily life should continue, so he decides to go to college as usual and train his mana for himself. Just when he starts wishing he could see Rita again, a tiny winged figure appears on his windowsill and offers to help him adjust to mana. Urda takes over the conversation and explains that humans need years of life with mana before they can handle it properly. She says Rita fought hard to get help for Yahello, and that Urda was sent instead of Rita herself. Urda studies Yahello's body, realizes how absurdly developed it is, and silently concludes that Rita tricked heaven into this assignment. Even so, Urda promises to help him adapt to mana quickly, which means staying close to him until he can use it well. She lands on his head and announces that her presence will trigger his mana, forcing Yahello to accept the worst possible training partner. The next day, Yahello leaves home with Urda still on his head and walks into a career that looks normal on the surface, but is already bracing for disaster. At the university, students are excitedly talking about skills, dungeons, and the woman called Empress who became famous in the other world. Yahello asks what it means to make a skill, and Urda explains that it is a mana-based ability humans can combine from records and energy. She also teaches him that a dungeon is a god-made trap that lures monsters in and lets qualified humans hunt them more safely. During the lecture, the professor talks about the world changing fast, but the class is already distracted and Yahello starts wondering if university still matters. Urda tells him that the best way to adapt is to hunt monsters, and Yahello finally agrees once she says the weak early monsters are still manageable. Since he still cannot sense monsters himself, he accepts Urda's help in finding them nearby and prepares to leave as soon as class ends. Before he can go, a community post on the computer shows the real disaster outside, a giant monster dog attacking people and buildings collapsing nearby. The class rushes to the window, and Yuiao follows their gaze to the grass square below, where insects the size of humans have appeared. Yuiao stays eerily calm as the insect monsters close in, because he had already expected a day like this to come. As the monsters head toward the building, the students panic and bolt from the lecture room, leaving Yuiao alone. Instead of hiding, he decides to go fight, mocking the monsters as a good leveling chance, and grabbing a desk apart for weapons. He remembers his bare face, rushes to the underground stationery store, and comes back up wearing a cheap Iron Man mask. On the square, he kicks down a human-sized mantis in one blow, and instantly gains his first monster level up. The power rush feels incredible, and Yuiao realizes the system really is letting him steal strength from monsters. When dozens of monsters swarm him, he admits he never learned group fighting, and Erta tells him to just use his body. He tears through the swarm, using every limb and weapon he has while his skills and levels keep climbing. Just as he is enjoying the fight, a second masked fighter appears and blows monsters apart with lightning from her hands. Yuiao and the Hulk-masked woman clear the square before the soldiers even arrive, and the army finds the last monster already being drop-kicked apart. Erta explains that insect monsters have magic stones and hard carapaces, so Yuiao immediately starts disassembling the corpses for loot. The onlookers are stunned by how fast he works, and the other masked fighter calmly asks him to disassemble for her too. Yuiao pauses, then answers with one blunt question: how much will she pay him? Yuiao and the masked woman finish haggling over the monster parts, and he tears apart the carapaces with such ease that the soldiers and students start gawking at both of them. The soldiers can only whisper about the Empress and the unknown Iron Man, while the masked woman stops a lieutenant with a casual crack of lightning and keeps walking. Once the crowd looks away, Yuiao vanishes from sight, and the people only notice the empty spot where he was standing. He slips away before anyone can stop him, annoyed that the lieutenant is still searching for him, and heads home thinking only about dinner. When he finally gets home, he remembers too late that he left his bag in the lecture room and has to go back for it. After dinner, he waits until his family thinks he is asleep, then slips out into the tense, empty night with a bag full of monster carapaces and tools. In a deserted playground, Yuiao decides to make his own defense gear from the insect shells instead of sitting still. Erta warns him that monster byproducts are hard to handle, but Yuiao immediately asks to be taught mana crafting. He crowds in too close to hear every detail, so Erta orders him to put her back on his head and starts explaining how mana crafting works. Erta explains synchronization, powdering magic stones, and bestowal, but also makes it clear that Yuiao current mana and will are too weak for serious results. Yuiao ignores the warning and starts cutting, sanding, and tying the carapaces into knee guards and wrist guards made to fit his body. Without having ever done it before, he somehow handles the process like second nature and quietly realizes that labor is just finding the trick. The basic gear is done, and Erta is stunned when he says he still has magic stones left and wants to try the advanced version anyway. He chooses the left wrist guard, the big mantis scythe, and the last magic stones, then forces the stones to pour their mana into the weapon until the blade responds. Erta secretly helps just enough for the attempt to work, and the mana crafting level rises when the scythe disappears into a hidden wrist blade. He tests the hidden blade by slicing through the chain of a nearby swing, then instantly bolts because he broke school property. Erta tells him to come back so she can fix the swing, but Yuiao keeps running, proving he still treats everything like he used to in his dropout days. On a Friday with no classes, Yuiao heads back to college anyway, hiding his true strength from his worried mother and choosing to hunt monsters on his own. He keeps moving through the tense city, thinking about money, mana, and gear while Erta complains that he needs to level up and kill strong monsters to get them. A TV in a storefront catches his eye, and he freezes when he sees the campus monster attack on the news along with the Iron Man mask and Hulk mask rescue footage. He hears the broadcast call the two fighters overbalanced ability users and dismisses the whole report, annoyed that the government is already trying to turn them into a special unit. The Hulk mask woman on the screen becomes the only thing that lingers in his mind, and Erta needles him about whether he is actually interested in her body figure. He finally admits the real problem is that he is too used to Rita, and then he shouts that he is not impotent, only unable to react to mana the way other people do. Erta suddenly senses a huge monster horde nearby, and the two of them realize the situation is far worse than she first claimed. Erta explains that Earth has been stuck in a 1,000-year gap while humanity was away, so the monsters left behind have had centuries to evolve into something far more dangerous. When Erta asks if he will fight until the higher powers can rebalance the world, Yuiao accepts with a grin, saying he likes trouble as long as he can run if he is about to die. Erta praises his strength too confidently, and Yuiao heads straight toward the approaching monsters with his steel spear and Iron Man-style mask ready. He spots the dire wolf horde first and drives his spear through the leader's face in one sudden strike, instantly gaining experience and a level. The rest of the pack immediately swarms him, but he cuts through the smaller wolves and wild dogs before civilians can be reached. When one dog rushes too close, he snaps out a hidden wrist blade and keeps fighting without breaking rhythm. A cunning big wolf tries to distract him by taking a hostage, but Yuiao refuses to hesitate and throws his spear straight through the wolf's head. With his spear gone, Yahello crashes into the remaining monsters barehanded and keeps killing them fast enough that the crowd can only stare. The soldiers finally arrive too late to stop the fight, pull the hostage clear, and scramble not to shoot, while the civilians keep shouting about Sungdai and Bolt being inside the battle. Once the monsters lose both leaders, Yahello wipes out the rest in minutes, and the platoon leader at last recognizes him as the masked fighter behind the rumors. The soldiers push the civilians away from the area, claiming another monster attack could happen at any time. Yahello meets the same female soldiers again, and the second lieutenant greets him like this reunion is unexpectedly good luck. Yahello immediately cuts her off by saying he had been trying to find her, turning the conversation into an awkward complaint about her leaving before he could speak. He keeps refusing to get pulled into their conversation and silently decides the country, or the military, cannot decide his choices for him. Using his spear like a knife, Yahello keeps skinning the wild dogs at top speed and suddenly realizes their bodies may still be worth selling. He offers to sell the dog corpses to the soldiers, and the second lieutenant is shocked enough to scramble for a yes before he changes his mind. Yahello refuses to sell the magic stones, and the lieutenant can only accept the hard limit with an annoyed click of her tongue. She admits she needs her superiors to approve the deal, then calls them, and the higher-ups quickly agree that monster bodies are now useful resources against monsters. Monsters are turning up all over the world, but most of them are still only strong enough for ordinary military firepower to handle. Yahello's dead monsters are in a completely different class, because he kills them with almost no damage to the bodies. That kind of intact corpse makes even skeptical soldiers and otherworlders call him the best hunter. Second Lieutenant Han Yirang sends the proof up the chain, and her superiors immediately tell her not to let him get away. When she says he refuses to talk, the order gets even worse: use any means short of violence, even a honey trap. Han Yirang swallows her pride and agrees to try persuading him, even though she is clearly miserable about it. Before the call even ends, Yahello casually says he wants cash payment ready for the monster bodies. That leaves Han Yirang stuck in the middle, ready to cry from how unlucky her job has become. Meanwhile, Yahello keeps humming while he finishes dismantling, pleased with how much more useful this hunt is than yesterday's insect monsters. Animal bones and leather are easier to process than insect shells, so this haul will give him far better materials and even magic stones for future artifacts. Yahello realizes the real prize from the wolf hunt is the magic stones, including ones from the dire wolf and the vice leader. He briefly considers eating the shiny stone, but Erda snaps at him and warns that a human would be controlled by monster mana. Yahello shudders at the warning and immediately starts imagining the future disaster of humans greedily swallowing magic stones for power. Resigned to that ugly truth, he sifts through the loot and keeps rolling the harmless-looking stones in his hands. Han Yirang gulps when she sees the haul, because even the small stones would be worth a fortune back in another world and even more on Earth. While Han Yirang daydreams about getting rich, Yahello packs the stones, bones, and leather into a makeshift wolfskin bag. The only thing left is a huge pile of wolf meat, and Yahello drops the idea of taking it after Erda says only someone with weak poison resistance could eat it. Han Yirang tries to act cute and ask for some magic stones and wolf leather, but Yahello shuts her down instantly. After she retreats in tears, Han Yirang vows to take her frustration out on the soldiers later. Then the cash delivery arrives with a lieutenant colonel level officer and a government worker attached as bonus, and Yahello braces for the hassle. Yahello considers turning back only the attached bonus, but that plan collapses the moment the officer starts praising him for killing all those monsters alone. Yahello ignores the talk around him and calmly checks the payout, 370 million won for the exchange. He realizes the buyers are watching the wolf leather bag closely and understands they probably want to cut ties cleanly. He asks if the exchange is finished and makes it clear the money is his now. When they try to keep talking, Yahello ends the exchange on his own terms and hints they may meet again soon. He pulls out his smartphone and launches the blinding flash app he downloaded after yesterday's Campus Square realization. The flash erupts, and everyone else reflexively closes their eyes as the light fills the area. By the time they look again, they think he has vanished, even though he is still right there. Using that split-second gap, Yahello slips back into concealment and asks if they should move on. A system message warns that Heaven will only respond to his report after one day, so he has to keep moving and avoid the monsters appearing elsewhere. He decides to find somewhere safe to stash the money and check his class before heading out again, then leaves the others behind to start his long day. Yahello daydreams about cool spy movies, then realizes he is the one doing the secret agent routine now, with Erda perched on his head instead of any glamorous heroine. Erda uses magic to keep him from being found out, and Yahello steals himself while hauling a bag stuffed with 370 million won. Yahello jokes that if money makes him this weak, he should have robbed banks instead of training all those years. Erda tells him he will get used to handling even bigger money someday, but Yahello casually refuses to hand over a single one. Erda insists she does not want the money, but Yahello dismisses her anyway, still underestimating himself even after proving his strength works on monsters. Yahello keeps pushing himself without rest, driven by habit and loneliness, even though nobody is sure whether it comes from his lonely 1,000-year stretch or Rita's strict training. He secretly stashes his spoils in the alley and feels lighter once he is no longer carrying everything on him. Seeing Erta cast her magic makes him oddly cheerful, and when she says it is time to depart, he blurts out that the class is still unchosen. Erta is shocked that he has not even picked a first class yet, especially after he fought with that much raw strength and training. Yahello jokes that he only needed to scroll down the record, and Erta explains that class choice comes from reading the records of Earth's changes. Yahello closes his eyes and remembers the class list, where the possible paths appear as record materialized into options. He scans the choices, sees names like Lancer, Grappler, Swordsman, Blacksmith, Shielder, Hunter, and Assassin, and starts thinking it over. He decides to rule out Assassin first, because his concealment is already enough, and he is afraid of fading away even more. Since he still cannot use mana, Yahello decides he needs a strong class that he can actually handle without it. Erta goes pale when she hears Yahello has 23 first-class job options after only 2 days with the Akashic records. She mutters that more time could have pushed that number even higher, maybe to 30 or 40. Yahello asks for her recommendation, and Erta points him toward Lancer or Grappler. Yahello agrees with the choice on instinct, since spear work and martial arts are the techniques he knows best. He remembers the techniques Rita pushed him to master, and quietly admits those are the ones he trusts most. Erta explains that a class specialization does not erase every other path, because subclasses can still come later. Yahello says the internet never mentioned that, and Erta pointedly refuses to answer any follow-up. After a brief pause, Yahello decides on Lancer because spears put more raw destructive power into a single strike. He reasons that grapplers can still use weapons, but the spear is the weapon that lets him pour all his strength straight through the target. He also trusts himself to get stronger by mastering his own technique and forging whatever spear he needs from new materials. Erta had been leaning toward Lancer anyway, and she quietly approves that he reached the answer on his own. Just as Yahello settles on the choice, a new job appears under the list, Blood Lancer. Yahello is thrown completely off balance because the new option appeared after he already chose, and it even adds a strange descriptive word to Lancer. He tells Erta about the sudden Blood Lancer option, and she instantly realizes it is a unique job. Erta becomes unusually excited, while Yahello only feels that it must be good without yet understanding why. Erta pushes Yahello to take the unique job, and he follows her logic and chooses Blurred Lancer for the destructive Lancer path he already wanted. The class is bestowed at once, and the system announces the Blurred Lancer bonuses, easier skill growth, a jump to level 18, and the harsh limit that he still cannot use mana or learn active skills. Yahello freezes when he realizes he misunderstood the name completely, because it is blurred, not blood, and that makes the whole thing sound absurd. The job change floods his body with power, making his muscles, legs, skin, and bones strengthen all at once until he reels from the strange soul-deep shock. He grumbles, accepts the result, and admits that whatever the class is called, he really did get stronger. Erta points out that earning 2 unique abilities from a first job is close to a miracle, especially since they fit him perfectly. Yahello checks the refresh status screen and sees his new stats, his maxed concealment and spearmanship, his crafted mana skill, and the ugly fact that his old title is still stuck there. Erta asks whether he got an active skill, and Yahello says no, ending the upgrade on that bluntly disappointing note. Erta tells Yahello that most people never learn mana for their first job, and warns that his growth is so strange he may still be unable to use it by his second. Yahello pushes back, asking if it is really that dangerous to face active skill users with nothing of his own. Erta agrees it would be dangerous for a normal person, then cuts off his next objection by saying his case is not normal. She explains the rule behind his growth. No wasted record means skipping early active skills can turn into a stronger reward later, especially with his unusual ability. Yahello sums it up as trading a chain of weak attacks for one strong one, and Erta confirms he has understood correctly. Yahello feels reassured, even though he still has no intention of stopping his mana training. Erta privately thinks about how his skipped skills may turn into something even stranger at the third advancement, and the thought makes her shiver. She laughs it off, then idly pulls at Yahello's hair before telling him to move. Yahello hides his items, completes his advancement, and gets ready to act as an executor. When Yahello asks where he is supposed to go, Erta casually tells him to find monsters within his range and hunt them down. Erta reveals that heaven has already sent multiple executors and angels, so Yahello is not the only one being sent after the monsters. She adds that another executor is Empress, which makes Yahello uncomfortable because he does not like being grouped with her. Erta explains the real deal. Heaven will reward him based on his performance, so higher achievements mean bigger rewards. Yahello likes that approach, because Erta is not preaching justice or morality, and is just telling him to do his best for the reward. That makes Yahello wonder if God might be refreshingly straightforward too, before he finally grumbles that he still hates having to run around like this. Yahello decides that running on his own is still better than sitting still, and pushes into a full-speed sprint while checking the internet on his phone. He finds real value in the search when an article about a tiger in Bukhansan leads him to a frightening news post about a huge bear wrecking a store near Zhongyang. He realizes the bear is near Jiriam Station, sets it as his destination, and sees that he can get there in about 3 minutes at his current speed. Erda urges him to hurry, but Yahello keeps accelerating and asks the question that matters most to him, whether he can still eat the bear's gallbladder. Erda answers with a bright smile that he can, but only if he has poison resistance, leaving the hunt with one clear condition. Yahello races uphill toward the chaos, only to see the streets thinning out as police and soldiers push civilians back down the hill. He reaches the disaster scene and finds a giant brown bear smashing through buildings while soldiers fire at it in panic. Erda tells him to finish it fast, but Yahello insists on timing and gets ready to strike with his spear and concealment. Using concealment, Yahello jumps first and drives his spear straight through the bear's open mouth. The bear charges back in fury, and Yahello tells the soldiers to run if they want to live. He keeps moving in the air, stabs the bear's paw, and uses the rebound to rise even higher. From that rebound, Yahello drops back down and finishes the bear with a full-force spear strike to the head. The bear dies, Yahello levels up, and the new title and critical hit skill make him realize his record is shaping his growth. Before he can leave, Du Wujun and his executor team arrive late, demanding to know where the monster is. Du Wujun introduces himself as Yahello's rival, but Yahello only asks what he plans to do after surpassing him. Du Wujun rants about Akashic record, growth, and becoming the strongest, but Yahello decides the whole thing is childish and turns back to work. The military major, Yun Daehan, approaches with a practical offer to share monster locations instead of wasting time trying to control Yahello. Yahello accepts the information, wraps the bear bones in leather, and leaves with a huge cash payout after more monster hunts that day. Back home, he thinks the money will cover his workshop, but Erda warns him about being traced and erases the contractor's memory for him. The next morning, a system message restores humanity's connection to the other world, and Yahello becomes a loner again. Erda finally admits the new world system is the cheapest way to reconnect Earth, but Yahello immediately turns the complaint back on himself and explodes over the fact that everyone else gets to go to another world while he stays behind. He complains that even his mom will ask why he never got to go, and Erda only tells him to accept that he has nothing to learn there and would have to become a higher existence to cross over at all. In the kitchen, Yahello finds his parents serious in front of the TV, where the emergency announcement has made school and work stop while the military starts a large-scale monster purge. His parents decide to go through with the system's otherworld path, and Yahello tells them to stay careful because Earth is still dangerous even if the military is clearing the roads. His father leaves first, but his mother stays behind and instantly exposes Yahello's masked monster hunting identity, leaving him frozen when she says she recognized her own son right away. She warns him that monsters are scary, humans may become even worse, and he must never overdo it before heading off to another world herself. Once he is alone again, Yahello decides to get back to work and heads to the storage building he bought overnight to turn into a workshop. Inside the bear workshop, he quickly processes the monster bones and leather before they spoil, using the 1,000 years of craft knowledge he built up during the time stop. He worries that the armor will take too long to finish, then Erda returns in a giantified human-sized form and reveals she can process the materials with magic instead. When he takes her hand, the heavenly quest reward arrives, his stats rise, and he acquires the Eternal Flame, a living red fire that burns on its own in the workshop fireplace. Erda explains that Rita strongly recommended the reward, and before Yahello can stop staring, she announces his second heavenly quest. He has to install dungeons on Earth. Yahello asks if she is crazy, but Erda insists the quest is for Earth too and praises him as the only person who can do what heaven needs, because his craft skills have reached an absurd level. When he presses her on what happens if he refuses, Erda admits heaven will just make worse dungeons instead, so he finally agrees after realizing this is at least the better option. Erda unloads the higher world materials and a blueprint for the Trap of Destruction, and Yahello realizes this quest is not dungeon management, but a brutal magic tool forging job. He works through his frustration, studies the absurd blueprint, and steels himself to begin while Erda reminds him that he can always melt it down and start over if he fails. He heats Harcanium in the Eternal Flame and starts the first forging step, discovering that the workshop tools and the flame together are enough to push the metal into shape. As Yahello hammers with impossible precision, Erda watches in awe and even thinks he might have become strong enough in craft to challenge God through technique alone. After finishing the form, he starts the inlaying on the Trap of Destruction, muttering that he might fail, and the chapter ends on the moment he engraves that overwhelming record into the world. Yahello pushes through the final stage of the artifact, engraving the Harcanium core and inlaying El Hadra with perfect control despite how exhausting and unforgiving the work is. Erda watches him with growing fascination and starts to understand why Rita was drawn to a man who could vanish completely into his craft. When Yahello finally sets down his tools, system messages confirm that blacksmithing has reached max level, and he has earned the title Creator of Myths. He says the artifact is finished, and Erda blushes after realizing she has been watching him work for 5 straight hours. Erda checks the result herself and finds the blueprint-perfect artifact so flawless that she can only stare at it in disbelief. The last step is still ahead, and Yahello says he was waiting for the mana crafting process with the Fesanam and magic stones. Erta summons her angel colleagues with a glowing ring, and several radiant angels appear inside the workshop to begin the final work. The angels crowd close, placing their hands on Yahello and pressing their overwhelming higher existence pressure onto him so they can guide the mana crafting. He steadies his breathing, takes the Fesanam and magic stones in one hand and the trap of destruction in the other, and focuses on the birth of a dungeon that can imprison evolved beasts. Yahello's will and the angels' mana fuse together, flooding the artifact with light until the materials vanish and the completed trap of destruction finally takes shape. System text declares the meticulous earthly trap of destruction complete, and Yahello feels the weight lift from his hand as the artifact hovers there on its own. The angels are stunned that the impossible worked on the first try, and Yahello has to tell them to back off because their presence is draining him. The angels start arguing about his talent, and then decide they need to see the dungeon activation for themselves, inviting Yahello to come with them. Erta explains the artifact's random options, and the angels discover this first creation has both alpha and beta effects, leaving Yahello even more interested. Carried through the air by two angels, Yahello looks down at the silent, monster-filled streets and feels the apocalypse all around him. The angels can't even recognize him as human at first, which irritates Yahello enough that he decides he will not mix with them after this quest is over. They land on a hilltop, and Erta throws the trap of destruction into the air to begin its activation in front of Yahello. The outer metal rings expand dramatically as the artifact falls, and Yahello realizes the angels are calmly treating this terrifying transformation as a success. Before Yahello can fully process it, the earth shakes and monsters start converging on the hill. The trap of destruction starts working, and a huge swarm of monsters rushes toward the hill from all over the district. Yahello asks what kind of power can pull in monsters like that, and Erta explains that the trap bends all 5 senses and lures them with whatever they want most. When he realizes the same trick is spreading to other traps across Earth, Yahello understands why the Harcanium had to be reused instead of wasted. The angels celebrate the success, but Yahello feels a chill as he watches monsters march into a prison they cannot escape, like fate itself is trapping them. He shuts down the sympathy in his own head and remembers that monsters have always been enemies, while the angel's power makes even him feel like a plaything. That realization hardens into one clear vow. He wants to become strong enough that no one can ever tell him what to do again. When Erta confirms the dungeon is being born, the angels declare the activation a perfect success and admit they need days to recover before they can make the next trap. Yahello offers to keep working immediately, but the angels refuse and explain they simply do not have enough mana left to move faster. Yahello casually suggests they rotate in Rita, and Erta instantly cuts him down by saying Rita is already overloaded helping him. He gives up on the trap for the moment, and heads home to make the dungeon form there first. That night, the monster migration in Seoul is broadcast everywhere, and the whole world realizes dungeons are appearing across Korea and nearby regions. As the news starts talking about monster livestock and government controls, Yahello shuts the TV off and heads for his workshop because his parents still have not come home. He jokes about making 5 traps by tomorrow, but Erta's bonus turns out to be even better. She finishes tanning and sterilizing all his monster leather for him. With fresh materials ready, Yahello immediately starts making armor from the direwolf leather and the bear hide, working with practiced speed. He adds ventilation and attack options to the boots and gloves, turning them into rare gear with sharp teeth and claws that can pop out on command. By sunrise he finishes a boiled bear leather armor that becomes his strongest work yet, then keeps going until the whole suit gains hidden bone spikes and a stronger mana-crafted form. He rounds out the set with bone knives and a direwolf skull mask, grinning at how much cooler he looks when his face is hidden. Erta points out that the mask makes his presence even weaker, and Yahello immediately notices the city outside has erupted into gunfire and screams. An emergency broadcast warns Jongno district to evacuate because a large second-class monster has appeared, and Yahello worries it may be stronger than the brown bear. He is not afraid of the fight at all. He is already thinking about stripping the monster's hide and making another better armor. Yahello quickly repairs his steel spear, and the weapon comes back stronger than before with unique rank and a critical hit bonus. He asks to borrow the anvil and hammer, but Erta refuses and stays with him, now small enough to sit on his head. Outside, the battle noise is far worse than before, and Yahello heads straight for the collapsing buildings and gunfire. He finds a giant leopard monster crushing the battlefield, while soldiers and ability users struggle to keep it from reaching the city center. Seeing ordinary fighters risking their lives, Yahello decides to help and sprints into the fight without showing himself. He leaps up the side of nearby buildings, closes on the leopard, and drives his spear into its left eye with a critical hit. The strike blinds the beast, exposes him to everyone, and the battlefield erupts as people realize Sungdyne Bolt has appeared. He yanks the spear free, cuts a huge wound across the leopard's face, and then rescues 2 soldiers from the falling military vehicle. With the monster focused on him, Yahello lets the others attack and uses the opening to keep the pressure on the wounded eye. The leopard starts mutating into something worse, and Yahello suddenly faces grotesque muscle strands bursting from the wound instead of a normal beast. Yahello jokes through the panic, but Erta warns him to finish it now because the monster is on the verge of evolving. The Empress joins the fight from a helicopter, admits her attack alone cannot kill it, and offers a short-term buff if Yahello can finish the job. She jumps down and grabs his leg to pass the buff by contact, flooding him with thunder power and a strict 30-second timer. Powered up, Yahello attacks at full speed and lands the finishing blow, exploding the leopard in blood and lightning. The monster dies, Yahello levels up, and the Empress realizes too late that only he got the experience because they never formed a party. The victory cheers fade when Yahello notices the leopard's hide is ruined, and all he can think about is losing the material for a new leather armor. After the battle, Yahello and the Empress immediately start rescuing the injured and trapped from the ruined battlefield. Even while still weakened from the penalty time, Yahello shocks everyone by casually hoisting several-ton rubble with one hand. Once the rescue is mostly done, the surviving soldiers turn to the giant leopard corpse and realize the real fight is now about the spoils. A soldier tries to carve into the corpse, but Yahello stops him cold and calls out that he should get the biggest share. Yahello asks the Empress to decide the fair split, and she immediately names the winning ratio: 60% for him, 20% for her, and 20% for everyone else. With the split accepted, Yahello climbs the leopard and digs out a huge blue magic stone from the wound in its head. When he casually claims the stone for himself, the soldiers erupt in greed and start fighting over whether the loot should be divided differently. Erda is stunned by how fast humans turn greedy, and Yahello answers with a dry smile that he will not be handing over anything. He throws the magic stone back into the leopard's skull so hard that everyone around him goes silent. Yahello then warns the group to take only what remains and give him 60%, backing the threat by stabbing his spear into the concrete. Nobody dares challenge him, so he calmly reclaims the stone and starts the real dismantling work. The Empress stays unfazed and bargains for her own share, asking for bones and as much hide as possible. Yahello dismantles the monster with terrifying precision, stripping exactly half the hide in just over 7 minutes. The towering pile of materials is so big that the Empress simply calls for a car to haul it away. Yahello refuses the offer to move his share and tries to leave, while the soldiers panic because they still need him to finish the dismantling. When they resist his terms, he offers one last deal: give him 50% and he will dismantle the rest for them. He does not wait for their vote and leaves with his share anyway, coolly packing the corpse materials into a wolf leather bag. The Empress follows him, says she could find him by focusing on his concealment skill, and openly asks him to party with her later. She explains that she plans to stay active on Earth too, then hands him her business card and asks him to contact her. After she leaves, Yahello finally feels alone again and heads home with Erda, ready to start making a lot of new gear. As the humans keep arguing over the spoils, the half-stripped leopard corpse lies forgotten and twitches once at the very end. Back in his workshop, Yahello keeps forging trap of destruction parts, while Erda worries that a third-class monster has already started appearing on Earth. He shrugs off the disaster, and Erda realizes the trap of destruction may have triggered monsters outside the dungeons instead of strengthening them directly. Yahello decides the only answer is to keep making the traps faster, and Erda pushes him to get stronger so he can see more of the world. After the angels help with mana crafting, the final trap of destruction is completed and carried away, leaving Yahello quietly hoping the danger lands somewhere far away. He notices his body has changed overnight, grown taller and broader, and Erda brushes it off as a natural result of leveling up and class growth. When he wakes up from a perfect sleep, Yahello unlocks a maxed resting skill, and Erda is stunned to learn he trained it just by studying how to sleep well for centuries. Erda finally explains skill evolution, and Yahello sees that his resting skill has absurd materials, including monster hearts, troll blood, good sleep, and a third-class magic stone. He gets angry at the impossible requirements, and Erda points out that spearmanship is even worse, demanding repeated kills of third-class monsters and stronger magic stones. Before going out, Yahello pulls on his direwolf skull mask and turns on the TV hoping to hear the trap of destruction news, but instead sees the ruined leopard battlefield gone strangely clean. The broadcast reveals that the people around the corpse vanished too, and Yahello realizes a hidden dungeon must have swallowed them. A black leopard suddenly appears on the news footage, and Yahello pieces together the truth. The giant leopard had a concealed cub with the same stealth ability. Yahello feels responsible for the deaths it caused, but Erda insists the disaster came from the leopard's frenzy and the human fight over the corpse, not his choice to leave it behind. He accepts that the black leopard is probably a third-class monster, and decides he has to clean up the mess himself, even if it means preparing carefully and fighting on his own terms. Because the leopard specializes in concealment, Yahello sees hope in his own stealth skills and heads out to call Kong Mirai for a joint plan to kill it. Yahello calls Kong Mirai early and warns her that the city incident is not a dungeon, but a concealed monster, and she immediately agrees to handle it with government and military support. After the call, Yahello heads back to his protected workshop, relieved that his ally is stronger than expected and ready to fight with him. He studies the giant leopard materials and starts cutting the bones into spiked pillars, refusing to explain his plan while Erda watches in confusion overhead. He finishes 6 bone pillars, then turns the rest of the monster parts into 6 hooked harpoons and long leather ropes for a giant trap weapon. Using the leopard's own magic stone, Yahello manufactures the parts into a unique weapon and confirms he now has a massive harpoon set built for binding prey. He straps the new weapon to his back, goes to the public phone booth again, and tells Kong Mirai not to enter the battlefield yet because the concealed monster may ambush her. He heads out feeling trusted for the first time in a long while, and the heavy weapon on his back only makes his steps faster. Arriving at the ruined battlefield in Seoul, Yahello senses the killing intent in the air and spots the black leopard lurking under its concealment among the collapsed buildings. He sets his two bone pillars far apart and realizes the monster still has not attacked, which makes him suspect that his own concealment is still covering the trap materials too. He aims the first harpoon and throws it before the leopard can react, pinning the monster's leg and forcing its concealment to break. The black leopard rips forward in fury, but the rope yanks it off balance, and Yahello rushes in to drive a second harpoon into its shoulder with a critical hit. When the monster swings back with terrifying strength, Yahello blocks the blow with crossed arms and survives thanks to his bone blades and leather armor, though both arm blades shatter. The leopard reveals a wind blade skill, and Yahello is forced to dodge its flying slashes while realizing he has badly underestimated what monsters can do. He answers by planting another pillar, throwing the third harpoon, and locking the leopard's left paw in place so it can no longer use the same attack freely. As the fight grows worse, Kong Mirai finally arrives in a sturdy armored vehicle and blasts the trapped leopard with twin lightning, stunning it at last. Kong Mirai arrives in the armored vehicle just as the lightning-struck black leopard collapses under the ropes and pillars. Yahello drives a pillar into the ground and pins the wounded leopard again before it can recover. He keeps closing the distance, sticking harpoons into the monster, while Kong Mirai's lightning keeps it from breaking free. The leopard shifts into a brutal blood berserk state, and Yahello realizes they only have to survive 2 more minutes. When Kong Mirai cannot get close, she starts firing from the vehicle, and Yahello immediately asks for something stronger. Yahello takes the machine gun, and a sudden shooting skill awakening turns his bullets into deadly precision. He keeps pouring bullets into the eye until Kong Mirai calls out that only a few seconds remain. At the exact moment the leopard breaks free, Kong Mirai unleashes triple lightning, and Yahello finishes it with a spear through the eye. While Kong Mirai collapses from exhaustion, Yahello ties the monster up again and even stabs it in the butt to keep it pinned. After the fight, Yahello casually asks if they are going to party and take the experience together. He parties with Kong Mirai, and the party link suddenly makes her feel physically closer to him. He throws the final spear and gets a massive experience reward, pushing him all the way from level 28 to 36. Seeing the ruined hide, Yahello regrets the damage, then spots a magic stone inside the monster, and realizes his luck has improved again. Kong Mirai insists on a fair split, praises Yahello as the real dismantler, and orders her men to haul the rest away. She asks to cancel the party partnership because the gap between them is too large, but says she will catch up and ask him again later. They shake hands to end the party, and Kong Mirai immediately asks for his contact information before leaving. Left alone afterward, Yahello celebrates getting a girl's number for the first time, then gathers his loot and checks for any hidden monster egg before he leaves. Back in his workshop, Yahello studies the new resting skill requirements and grins at the absurd but valuable conditions. Erda teases him about troll blood and monster hearts, but Yahello is already thinking about weapon upgrades. He settles for the materials he has and starts repairing the ruined leopard hunter harpoon set. A stray tendon falls into the eternal flame and suddenly changes, catching Yahello's full attention. He tests the heated tendon until it becomes a terrifyingly elastic material he names Giant's Rubber Band. Using that strange tendon power, he decides to build a pile bunker instead of a normal weapon. He finishes the Lightspeed pile bunker, complete with ridiculous power and an even more ridiculous loading process. He proudly realizes the weapon is powerful, but Erda points out that its size makes it clumsy and impractical. He stays in the workshop for more than a month, forging traps of destruction and new weapons non-stop until the angels finally come to collect them. When the angels take the traps, Erda grows sharp and cold toward Shiryuta, revealing how tense the heavenly side has become. After the angels leave, Erda admits that even the supposedly emotionless angels are getting tangled up around Yahello. Erda finally reveals 2 rewards: dungeon location information and a spatial bag that can hold absurd amounts of gear. The bag swallows his weapons and workshop tools with ease, and Yahello immediately starts thinking about using it like a giant club. Armed with the new bag and a trap for later, he leaves the workshop and heads into the quiet, half-stopped city. While running toward the hill, he learns that monsters are not just appearing naturally on Earth anymore, but also inside the dungeon itself. At the cave mouth, the dungeon blocks entry because of his low level, forcing Erda to intervene and lift the restriction. With Erda at his side, Yahello steps into the dungeon and meets a monster from another world for the first time. Yahello steps into the dungeon for the first time and is stunned by how the tiny trap of destruction has warped an entire space into a sealed inner world. His excitement crashes when a huge rolling lump of metal turns out to be an enemy, not treasure. Yahello swaps to his heavy battle crusher and crushes the metal heart in one brutal strike, instantly gaining a huge burst of experience. After extracting the glowing heart core, he learns that metal hearts are ambush monsters whose true weakness is getting hit before they can react. The dungeon turns into repetitive labor, with Yahello dropping metal hearts one after another while Erta keeps mocking how abnormal he is. With days passing and only jerky for food, he gets fed up with dungeon life and even starts craving Rita's cooking. When the metal hearts suddenly grow much larger, Erta finally realizes they have found a big metal heart, a far stronger variant. Yahello decides to fight it head-on with his oversized pile bunker, trusting his strength more than retreat. He launches himself through the air and fires the pile bunker point blank, punching a long bone bullet straight through the big metal heart. The bullet is powerful enough to work, but it is also ruined on impact, forcing Yahello to accept that this weapon is basically one-use ammo. When another big metal heart appears deeper inside, Erta is shocked, but Yahello decides to save the pile bunker ammo for whatever comes next. He switches to a bizarre hammer loaded with explosive bone cartridges and uses it to cripple the big metal heart with shrapnel before finishing it off. The shrapnel traps the monster in place, so Yahello laughs off the result, switches back to his axe, and finishes it while the monster can barely move. After leveling up again, Yahello worries about the other returnees and admits he is especially concerned about his parents. Near the dungeon center, he finds no grand evolution chain, just more big metal hearts, and Erta confirms the dungeon is nearly cleared. Erta inspects the dungeon's trap of destruction and says it is much older than she expected, but not actually dangerous for the current mission. Yahello jokes about a dragon showing up, but that uneasy warning hangs over him as a clear foreshadowing. 2 weeks after entering, Yahello finally crawls out of the dungeon, now having finished installing all 8 traps of destruction on Earth. The traps of destruction start paying off worldwide, and Earth finally begins to quiet down as monsters disappear from cities and highways. Yahello shuts off the TV, hears the human noise outside, and wonders if his parents have made it back safely. He explains that he stayed up all night forging, then checks the finished armor, weapons, and ammunition he made from metal heart and big metal heart hearts. He regrets not having a magic stone for the work, but Erta reminds him that core metals make mana crafting easier and can even attach options more often. After finishing everything, Yahello tries to part with his old hammer and anvil, treating them like an old companion he has to leave behind. When he notices the eternal flame reacting to the discarded armor, he decides to feed it the old equipment, and the flame happily devours everything and grows stronger. He finally leaves the workshop, goes home through the noisy streets, showers, and collapses into bed while still worrying about his parents. He wakes to the smell of food and feels relief when he realizes his parents are home safely. His father rushes out for work because financial restrictions have lifted, and the sudden return of normal society leaves Yahello stunned. When his father confesses he only barely advanced in class and begs his son to become a hunter, Yahello realizes how worried his parents have been. Yahello gives his father a priceless metal inner layer armor, and his father is shocked by how valuable and impossible it is. His mother comes out with quest ingredients turned into a full meal, and the family finally settles down to eat together. When his mother asks about university, Yahello decides to stop looking backward and refuses to go, choosing his own future instead. He gives his mother a protective armor too, but she immediately gets more excited about the cross bag and its shopping potential. With his parents safe and his future decided, Yahello heads back out and starts checking the armor options that Erta has been waiting to inspect. The armor reveals 3 options and a legend rank, shocking even Erta because it was forged without mana crafting and became a masterpiece instead of a normal weapon. Erta warns him never to sell such an item, then names the 3rd option Gamma, which annoys him more than it impresses him. When Yahello steps back into the workshop, he finds heavenly replacement tools waiting for him and learns that his reward also upgraded the workspace. Erta declares the quest completed and hands over the next reward, which turns out to be a skill record for extreme poison resistance. He absorbs the record immediately, gains extreme poison resistance, and happily realizes he can now ignore powerful monster poison. The final reward reveals the Troll Dungeon's location in America, and Yahello instantly switches from excitement to panic. He realizes he has no passport, but decides to sneak into the trip anyway and calls it a sacrifice of small things for a bigger goal. He tells his mother he will be gone for a few days, gets her quiet approval, and sets off toward the airport in disguise. He boards the flight to Los Angeles without being caught, but the trip goes wrong the moment he arrives and hears that monsters are attacking the city. Accepting that the disaster is real, Yahello equips himself and heads into his first Earth overflow battle. Erta explains that an overflow turns the outside world into a dungeon-like battlefield, and that if even one monster escapes, another outbreak can follow. Annoyed that the mess landed on him again, Yahello demands a reward-heavy quest and accepts it just before the terminal exit explodes. Flame lizards pour into the airport, and Yahello leaps into the fight with his dark spear after showing off the armor's defense. He cuts down the first flame lizard in one brutal spear strike, then casually stuffs the corpse away while the crowd stares at the armored stranger. He keeps charging through the chaos, using the fire attacks as practice while the humans around him struggle to keep their footing. After the warrior thanks him, Yahello leaves her with one cold warning and immediately starts shouting for more enemies. When the monsters ignore his taunt, Yahello decides to hunt the source instead and launches into the air to find the leader. He finds the monster leader, uses an exploding chunk of building as cover and propulsion, then smashes through the shock with a pile bunker shot. Yahello lands a bone bullet straight through the flame lizard leader's head, and the impact drives so hard the ground starts to cave in. When guards rush in to save their boss, the human fighters finally wake up and throw up shields and weapons to block them. Yahello swaps weapons in midair, pulling out the unique greatsword and burying the leader deeper under one brutal swing. The swing tears through the guards' weapons and helmets, and Yahello's swordsmanship skill suddenly awakens at max level. The leader is still alive, but Yahello keeps smashing the bone ammo in its head until the monster's skull finally gives out. The dying boss tries to blow up the whole hill with the exothermic ground, but Yahello crushes the last opening and kills the flame lizard wizard before it can trigger the blast. After the kill, Yahello learns the terrible truth. The monsters were born from the trap of destruction, and Harcanium is probably gone for good. He stuffs the boss's body into his cross bag and rides the great sword down the hill like a sleigh, grinning at the absurd ride. At the bottom, the fighters crowd around him in awe, but Yahello only tells them to keep hunting so no monster escapes. He hears two Koreans quietly guessing his class and gets irritated that they think he's only second class despite everything he just did. Yahello sweeps the remaining flame lizards by himself, cutting through the battlefield so fast that the fight stops feeling real. Erda points out the hidden survivors on the map, and Yahello hunts down every last fleeing mutant before they can escape. When the last monster drops, Yahello claims first place and heads back to the airport with a bag heavy enough to sink the ground. The quest ends with a clean victory, and inside the airport Yahello hides in an alley to strip off his bloodied armor and prep the pile bunker again. Erda calls in a circle of friendly angels, and they begin mana crafting the cross bag so it can finally control its own weight. The angels finish the upgrade, and Erda hands Yahello a cross bag that no longer shakes the ground when he moves. The angels linger to praise his battle, but Yahello only asks for money and tries to ignore their questions. One angel reveals she was watching another human too, and Yahello learns Earth's angels quietly help strong people stay alive. Erda shuts down the nosy angel's attempt to talk about Yahello's privacy, and the group awkwardly backs off. Feta tells Yahello to help Nayuna if they meet again, but he stubbornly repeats that he just wants to board the plane and disappear. He finally receives the Heaven Quest bonus skill, Superhuman Strength, and grimaces because it still feels like a monster's power. At the gate, the two Koreans are still hunting for the mysterious armored man, and Yahello hides from their excited chatter before slipping aboard the plane. Once he's seated safely, Yahello finally relaxes, jokes about another overflow, and then instantly collapses into despair when he remembers Arizona means the Korean couple is coming too. Yahello lands in Arizona, hears the dungeon is at the Grand Canyon, and immediately senses this trip is going to be trouble. He runs straight toward the canyon while checking the resting skill requirements and pressing Erta for details about troll blood and sleeping monsters. At the Grand Canyon, the huge empty rift overwhelms him for a moment, and he admits he would be lost without Erta guiding him. They head deeper into the canyon in a straight line, and Yahello starts cutting down stray monsters as easy experience instead of slowing down. When they reach the dungeon gate, both of them realize the strange vortex is far bigger than a normal troll dungeon and probably unstable. Erta explains that two Trap of Destruction dungeons are too close together, which has bloated the mana and may even make the dungeon collapse into reality. The gate's level limit is only 40, so Yahello decides to go in anyway and calls Erta's confidence more worrying than reassuring. Inside, the dungeon turns out to be a highland full of sleeping trolls, and Yahello instantly spots one lounging on a giant tree like a bored old man. Yahello realizes the troll is actually asleep, not just resting, and quietly moves in to take its head off with a surprise strike. The kill lands cleanly, and Yahello immediately collects troll blood and heart materials as the resting skill progress begins climbing. He discovers troll meat tastes surprisingly good, keeps grilling more of it, and even learns that his poison resistance is leveling from all the abuse. 2 days later, the cooking skill finally appears after all the monster grilling, and Erta is horrified that his dungeon meal plan is actually paying off. He keeps hunting, eating, and stockpiling blood and hearts until he nears the resting skill goal and finally hits level 48. When the next troll dies, he crosses the class threshold and the system freezes his level up, forcing him to choose a second job before anything else can continue. Erta explains the 4 options, Yahello dismisses the obvious picks, and he chooses the risky Rookie Reaper path because it sounds more interesting. The new class description appears, and the worst part of it is immediately obvious. To become a death god, Yahello must kill 100 second-class monsters and 1 third-class monster in a single surprise strike. Yahello realizes the quest is really asking him to land a surprise one-shot on a third-class monster, and he decides the only way to boost his odds is mana crafting. He gives up on evolving his resting skill for now and decides to pour the third-class magic stone into his armor and pile bunker instead. Before getting back to work, he casually grills troll meat, confident that his cooking skill has become absurdly good. While eating, he jokes that a third-class monster should appear here sooner or later, and Erda quietly warns him that one is already on the way. A giant sand scorpion suddenly charges across the horizon with Na Yu Na trapped in one pincer, and Kang Ha Jin and Feta scrambling behind her. Yahello curses the absurd sight, then fires his metal heart skewer so fast that the scorpion never even notices him. The skewer punches through the monster's hard shell, the scorpion thrashes in pain, and Na Yu Na is thrown free into the air. Yahello catches Na Yu Na in midair and hurls her straight into Kang Ha Jin before diving back toward the monster. He finishes the scorpion with one black spear strike, and the system rewards him with huge experience and a critical hit level up. Erda explains that the monster only seemed weak to him because its poison was useless against his extreme resistance. As Yahello starts dismantling the corpse, Na Yu Na and Kang Ha Jin finally get a clear look at him and recognize the LA Dark Knight rumor. Na Yu Na shows him phone chatter about the Dark Knight of LA, and Yahello is left stunned that his masked fight has already gone viral. After they thank him and eat his poison-cleansed scorpion grill, Na Yu Na starts openly inviting him to party with them. Kang Ha Jin thanks Yahello properly, warns him not to trust anyone in a dungeon, and hands over his ID card with a promise to repay him later. Yahello notices the ID card matches the one Kang Mi Ray gave him, but he keeps the thought to himself and lets them go. Once they disappear over the horizon, Yahello finally starts mana crafting and chooses to put the third-class Shadow Leopard stone into his armor first. Mana crafting fuses the stone with the armor, and a black-hued legend full plate is born with a huge defense boost and a surprise attack bonus. Yahello immediately turns to the pile bunker, insisting that people and weapons are strongest right before death, and starts preparing the next lethal upgrade. After upgrading his pile bunker and ammo, Yahello quietly tails the fast-moving man and woman through the monster-filled highlands. He listens to their bickering and realizes they are not a couple at all, just a proud priestess and a blunt frontliner with their own awkward teamwork. When Yahello learns they are hunting for poison, he immediately decides a stronger target has to be worth following them for. Spotting a hidden scorpion first, he decides to test his metal heart skewers and drops it with one silent surprise shot. As Yahello keeps ambushing scorpions from afar, Kang Ha Jin and Na Yu Na start wondering why the attacks around them have suddenly thinned out. The pair identify a giant death stalker as only a second-class monster, and Yahello feels crushed that his big dramatic expectation was wrong. Before he can even sulk, a massive troll boss appears and Yahello readies his modified self-destructing pile bunker for a one-shot kill. He boosts himself with superhuman strength and launches into the air, racing to smash the troll before it can reach Na Yu Na and Kang Ha Jin. The pile bunker lands and detonates through the troll's body, shaking the ground and leaving the monster utterly shattered in a single hit. Yahello lands on the corpse. The pile bunker is gone for good, and he immediately becomes the center of stunned attention. Na Yu Na quickly offers to share everything but the poison if Yahello helps finish the scorpion, and Kang Ha Jin reluctantly backs her up. Yahello agrees, draws his spear, and cuts the scorpion apart, while Kang Ha Jin's follow-up strike and Na Yu Na's buff keep it pinned down. The scorpion finally collapses. Yahello claims all the experience because they were never in a party, and Kang Ha Jin has to swallow the loss. Yahello dismantles the corpse, hands over the poison they wanted, and quietly keeps the rest of the valuable materials for himself. A troll magic stone finally drops, giving Yahello a better shot at evolving resting, and Na Yu Na instinctively tops up his stamina when she notices he is tiring. Kang Ha Jin then invites him to join their Korean clan, but Yahello flatly refuses because he has no interest in being absorbed into anyone's group. After a polite goodbye, Yahello watches them leave, then immediately turns his mind back to his own goal and looks ready to evolve resting at last. Yahello sees the last materials for skill evolution finally complete and asks Erda what to do next. He closes his eyes and lets the gathered materials rise into the air, where they fuse around the magic stone in a painful skill evolution. The evolution completes, and Yahello gains Transcendent Regeneration, a powerful EX-tier skill that can regrow lost body parts after enough rest. He accepts the new skill, then immediately turns back to the brutal advancement, surprise killing dozens of second-class monsters. Instead of easy ambushes, the trolls are wandering around strangely, muttering about resting and dying as if something is off. Yahello keeps ambushing trolls one by one, but the hunt becomes annoyingly slow as he has to wander the dungeon for every kill. After 2 days and only 78 kills, he grows irritated, and the troll's strange self-aware muttering makes him suspect a bigger mystery. By the 3rd day, they decide the dungeon is hiding something worse than the identified troll boss, so Yahello chooses to retreat. But when they try to leave, the path has changed, the entrance is gone, and Erda panics because even her angel ring cannot contact heaven. Erda finally says the frightening word: this place may be an abandoned world, where heaven has cut off support and a world is left to die. Before they can process it, a black scythe drops from above and Yahello dives to shield Erda from the ambush. The hidden monster reveals itself as a thin, hooded death godlike creature, and Yahello realizes it is a third-class threat, not a hopelessly unbeatable one. The monster fixates on records in Erda instead of Yahello, and he starts fighting it with pure footwork and spear timing. Yahello lands the first clean hit, but the monster answers with black spikes, wind blades, and curse-like attacks that start shredding his armor. The fight gets worse as the monster becomes faster and more destructive, and Yahello is forced to admit he will need mana to wield power like this. He forces a risky opening with a critical spear strike, but the monster's hidden spike tears into his arm and curses him with black poison-like corruption. Urta realizes the monster keeps targeting her, so she decides to leave the battlefield and trust Yahello to survive without her. Alone again, Yahello shakes off the pain, decides the fight is still winnable, and launches himself back into the mana storm. Urta pushes deeper through the dungeon, realizing her heaven-granted power is already weaker here than Yahello's and that something on Earth is warping the whole situation. She catches Fata's signal, finds that Fata is with Yuna and Kang Ha-jin, and decides the only way out is to bring everyone together against the dungeon's core monster. On the battlefield, Yahello is at his limit, wounded, cursed, nearly blind, and still forcing his body to keep moving against the death god. Even so, he keeps reading the enemy's timing, lands repeated spear strikes, and finally drives the death god back hard enough to expose its panic. The curse crushes him to the ground, the death god lands a brutal counterattack, and Yahello realizes he may actually die if help does not arrive now. Right before the killing blow, Kang Ha-jin and Yuna rush in with Urta's help and wrench Yahello back from the edge, giving him enough strength to stand again. Yahello learns he only has a short opening, tells Kang Ha-jin 30 seconds is enough, and then runs off toward the distant trolls to finish the job Urta set up. Using Urta's illusion trick, Yahello ambushes the 3 trolls and kills all of them in a single explosive spear assault, satisfying the final condition for his advancement. The system recognizes him as a rookie reaper, his level surges, his health fully recovers, and the death god battle finally swings into his favor. Back in the main fight, Kang Ha-jin holds the line under brutal pressure while Yuna's chanting and pink holy power keep him alive long enough for Yahello to return. Yahello re-enters the party, slips back into concealment, and drives his spear straight through the death god's chest with a perfect critical hit. At the last second the death god speaks in a clear woman's voice, and Yahello finishes her without hesitation as the monster collapses. After the kill, Yahello gains an enormous burst of experience, reaches level 55, and absorbs the life record of Redakar. When he reaches for the corpse to dismantle it, the dead woman instantly turns to black ash, shocking everyone and confirming she was a breaker, not a normal monster. The dungeon entrance opens at last. Urta explains that breakers are people swallowed by monster mana, and Yahello realizes the dungeon's secrets are even stranger than he expected. Even with the new mystery hanging over him, Yahello only cares about one thing now: he survived, and he won. After the fight, Yahello calmly takes the black magic stone and Redakaraiche's relics, treating the loot as his due. Kang Ha-jin tries to stay polite and gives in, and Yuna immediately fires off her usual playful demand for Yahello's number. Yahello asks Urta what still needs to be done, and she tells him to rest while Heaven handles the aftermath, and later seals the dungeon itself. Yuna keeps chatting and trying to get closer, but Yahello refuses to soften, only giving her his name once he realizes hiding it is pointless. Yahello realizes Kang Mire will probably figure him out anyway, so he stops pretending and admits who he is. Yuna immediately latches onto him even harder, but Yahello bluntly keeps her at arm's length and refuses to let the conversation turn personal. Outside the dungeon, a group of armed angels is waiting, and a higher-ranking armored angel takes charge of the situation at once. The commander only gives Yahello a delayed reward, says Heaven needs Urta for the investigation, and orders the temporary sealing to begin. Watching the gate close, Yahello hardens his resolve and decides that none of the unknowns matter as long as he keeps getting stronger. The armored angel quietly tells Yahello that Earth is becoming a place where God's power matters less, and that more angels will be assigned here. Before Yahello can even respond, the angels vanish with Urta and Fata, leaving him annoyed at how abruptly they cut things off. Yuna drags both men away from the dungeon, keeps calling them by familiar names, and then starts pushing for even more closeness on the way back. Yuna keeps trying to pin him down all the way to the plane, but Yahello shuts her down and plans to disappear from her circle again once they land. At Incheon Airport, Yuna and Kang Ha-jin draw every eye as Fred leads them out to the waiting limousine. Inside the limousine, Kang Mire cuts straight to the real reason for the meeting and asks if they got what she wanted. Yuna blurts out that Kang Ha-jin got beaten badly, and his humiliation is exposed before he can stop her. Yuna starts praising Yahello, and Kang Mire realizes the spear user and his pile bunker were the one Yuna is talking about. After hearing that Fata called Yahello the strongest on Earth, Kang Mire coolly admits she is curious but insists she will catch up soon. Yuna keeps crowding Kang Mire affectionately, and the two childhood friends fall back into their usual noisy rhythm. Kang Ha-jin silently compares himself to Yahello, swallows his jealousy, and decides he will win through his own strengths instead. While the limousine heads onward, Yahello races home at absurd speed and gets back before anyone else has settled in. Yahello arrives to find his father absent and his mother gone on a quest, leaving only a note about fresh seafood from a human. Amused by his mother's easy confidence, Yuialhan heads to the workshop after washing up, ready to sort the monster haul. He starts dismantling the monster haul and realizes there is far too much meat to save before it spoils. Instead of wasting it, he decides to test whether the eternal flame can eat the cooked meat and help him gain cooking experience. After 3 hours of non-stop grilling, the eternal flame devours every cooked piece, and Yuialhan clears the mountain of meat from the workshop. Once the meat is gone, he is left with bones, hides, carapace, and tendons weighing more than 10 tons, so he gets back to crafting. His first experiments failed to make a strong rubber band from the troll and flame lizard tendons, so he turns to the Highland Troll boss material instead. He heats the boss tendon carefully, and the material starts changing instead of burning, which tells him the mutation is real. Just when the transformation seems ready to fail, Yuialhan realizes the fire needs magic stones to push the change further. He feeds the eternal flame, the tendon turns scarlet and shrinks into a superior giant's rubber band, and Yuialhan triumphantly declares the flame unbeatable. Thinking of the weapons and options he can build next, Yuialhan starts hammering away at his new materials again. Far away, an angelic meeting turns tense as the report confirms Reta Karaichi was an elf from the abandoned world of Daru, and no one can explain how she reached Earth. The chairperson warns that the real danger is the overlap between Earth, the abandoned world, and the traps of destruction, and the room grows uneasy. When the angels question whether a human could really kill a third-class breaker, Theta finally confirms that Yuialhan and Na Yuna did it together. Suspicion starts to turn toward Yuialhan, but Lita erupts and fiercely defends him as a good kid who earned praise, not doubt. The chairman restores order, agrees Yuialhan deserves rewards, and decides to send far more angels to Earth while also assigning guardian angels to chosen humans. As the meeting breaks up, Erta and Lita argue over what reward would truly help Yuialhan, and Muta quietly promises to give him the best one. Muta ends the discussion by saying Yuialhan is the one dropout most likely to reach the heart of the problem, leaving the angels stunned. Yuialhan spends the whole day in his workshop turning monster materials into a much stronger pile bunker and a pile of custom weapons. Using plenty of second-class magic stones and better mana crafting, he finishes a unique grade pile bunker with terrifying power and even more terrifying recoil. He accepts that the pile bunker still cannot reach a 5th loading stage, but the 4th stage is already strong enough to satisfy him. He keeps going and mass-produces hammers, axes, great swords, and even a giant rubber band grenade from the new materials. Instead of a bow or gun, he makes an atlotto because it fits his spear mastery and works better against huge monsters at range. He repairs his damaged black full-plate armor and makes tough troll-skin clothing with better airflow and defense. When he opens the cross bag for more materials, he finally remembers the black robe, black scythe, and black magic stone left by Reta Karaichi. The robe is a concealment-boosting unique item, and the scythe is a powerful but unfamiliar weapon that he decides not to use as is. He repairs the robe with a magic stone, then throws the scythe into the furnace so he can melt it down and rebuild it as a spear. The eternal flame struggles to melt the scythe, but when black aura rises from it, Yuialhan starts baiting the hidden power with Reta Karaichi's name and traits. His keyword attacks work, and the black aura finally breaks loose from the scythe and gets absorbed into the magic stone instead. He keeps hammering the stubborn metal, and even the angels outside can tell he is turning the ruined weapon into something far better. Bit by bit, the metal changes under his hands until a black glinting legendary spear is born from the scythe's remains. He realizes the spear still needs mana crafting to be complete, but then notices 2 presences inside the supposedly sealed workshop. He finds Erta and Lita waiting for him, and the long-missed angel with a familiar fragrance is exactly the visitor he sensed first. Lita and Erta explain that Heaven changed its policy toward Yuialhan after the angel conference, and now treats him as a valuable ally. Yuialhan is frustrated by Heaven's vague support, but Erta admits they finally see him as an ally and can afford to be more honest with him now. The reward turns out to be a strengthened cross bag, and Yuialhan immediately tries to squeeze even more utility out of it with the angel's help. To his shock, that was only the first reward, and Erta sends Lita forward to handle the real gift, a new subclass. Yuialhan closes his eyes, sees the long list of possible subclasses, and stops at the strange white-lit choice called Angel's Partner. He figures out that Heaven interfered with his records to create the subclass, and Erta openly says it is meant to let him borrow angel power in an abandoned world. Lita bluntly admits the subclass will also keep her close to him, and Yuialhan reluctantly agrees to take it. The subclass takes hold painfully, but then he feels the 2 angels' power linking to him and realizes the new partnership is actually useful. He receives Angel's Partner, along with Angel's Protection and Angel's Support, which increase his survival and let him borrow angel power more easily. Yuialhan accepts that the angels are now part of his growth, but he still immediately returns to work and plans to finish the spear, the harpoons, and the troll blood next. Yuialhan ignores Lita's complaints and keeps working, determined to finish his forging before thinking about anything else. He mana crafts the Extermination Spike Spear, pulling the power out of the magic stone and forcing it to settle into the weapon. The finished weapon comes out as the legendary Dark Death God's Dragon Exterminating Spike Spear, and Yu Ailhan is stunned that it now has dragon-killing bonuses. Lita and Erta realize he overworked the crafting so hard that the spear picked up Reta Karaiche's dragon-exterminating trait, which sends Yu Ailhan into a panic about facing dragons soon. Instead of calming down, he immediately starts making a dragon-specialized harpoon set, and uses Erta's image help to shape it for binding dragonkin. The harpoon set finishes as a unique weapon with dragonkin bonuses, and Yu Ailhan keeps pushing straight into the last job on the list. He boils and refines the troll boss's blood into blood ink, carefully separating the best portion into a special container for a later use no one else understands yet. By morning, the work is finally done, and Yu Ailhan stretches in satisfaction before deciding to spend time with both angels instead of letting them keep bickering. Yu Ailhan shocks them by scolding Lita about fighting and saying the two of them should get along if they want his angel support skill to grow faster. On TV, Korea's new ability user system takes shape around the Special Ability Management Bureau, rank checks, and the growing problem of talent leaving the country. Yu Ailhan complains that he still cannot wield mana yet, even though he can feel it stirring inside his body and knows he has months left before it fully opens up. Lita teases him about attaching themselves even more closely, but Erta shuts that down fast and the two angels start bickering over what is and is not allowed. Once the teasing settles, Yu Ailhan lays out his real plan: earn money, expand the workshop, become independent from his parents, and sell better gear to the people of Earth. He decides to start with suppression, since their gear is terrible and their fighters need help most, and he figures good weapons could raise their strength sharply. Yu Ailhan then names the Empress as his next target because her weapon and armor look too weak, and he decides to call her directly. Kang Mirai answers, and Yu Ailhan immediately opens negotiations by offering to sell her a stronger weapon and better armor if she and her brother can pay the right price. Yu Ailhan laughs when Kang Mirai brings up Yuna and her big brother, and realizes she must have heard about the people he saved. Kang Mirai thanks him awkwardly and says she wanted to do it in person, while Yu Ailhan agrees to meet if she can pay and help him with holy power materials. He decides he is free enough to meet her now that resting has improved, and he has reached second class. After washing up, he puts on his usual decolorized jeans, the Highland Troll Boss leather jacket, and the repaired wolf skull mask, which makes Lita sigh in relief. When Lita teases him for not being on a date, Yu Ailhan gets weirdly annoyed just from hearing the word. Kang Mirai picks a luxurious tea shop with private rooms, and Yu Ailhan has to be guided in because the staff cannot even spot him at first. Inside the private room, Kang Mirai sits maskless and openly says she has nothing to hide, while Yu Ailhan keeps his own face covered. She explains that mage weapons need strong mana crafting, and Yu Ailhan casually drops that his smith is level 29, leaving her struggling to keep her composure. Kang Mirai lists her weapon wishes, and the conversation turns into a game-like discussion about alpha and beta options, especially the dream of reducing magic skill reuse delay. She does the same with the robe, insisting on magic-related bonuses and rambling about legendary hero robes until Yu Ailhan has to sit through it all. When they discuss price, Kang Mirai casually throws out billions of won, and Yu Ailhan is stunned by how unreal her scale of wealth is. Yu Ailhan leaves the meeting still baffled, while Erta and Lita mock him for only getting serious when money is involved. Once he realizes the request is worth 15 billion won, Yu Ailhan instantly shifts into hunting mode and decides to raid the 2 dungeons needed for the materials. He chooses to tackle the lightning mutated species dungeon in Korea first, while the angels insist it is still a normal dungeon and not an abandoned world trap. At the mountain entrance, Yu Ailhan confirms the dungeon looks ordinary, and the angels lower the entry requirement so he can go in with them. He enters the dungeon with the angels, the level requirement snaps back afterward, and that confirms no outside force can interfere with him inside. Far away in China, a human and a male angel secretly coordinate a dungeon mutation and a dimensional connection, preparing a dangerous plan for Earth. The human grumbles about suffering under the plan, while the angel sneers at humans and boasts that no higher angel will come down to interfere. The angel and the conspirator both believe Earth is just a lower world, but they have no idea a higher angel has already come down on her own. Yu Ailhan enters the dungeon and immediately finds out every monster here is packed with lightning power. He cuts down a giant lightning rat in one swing, but the monster is so weak that he barely gets scratched. Erta and Sleepy Lita react while Yu Ailhan complains that not taking damage makes his regeneration training impossible. He decides to use superhuman strength on purpose so the boost and the weakness after it can finally create a training window. For 3 minutes he bulldozes through the monsters, then the skill ends and his body drops into a heavy weakness. He spots a giant lightning bird and deliberately lets it land a hit because he knows the weakness is the only chance to train properly. The lightning attack barely hurts him at all, and he realizes his legendary armor is still protecting him too well. He thinks about removing the armor, but with unknown monsters still inside the dungeon, he decides that is too reckless. Even a little damage is enough for his plan, so he charges in and splits the lightning bird with a clean spear strike. Erta explains that his class and surprise attack bonuses make every ambush absurdly strong, and Yu Ailhan decides he still needs more hits before the penalty ends. He keeps repeating the same brutal rhythm, smashing monsters during the boost and enduring the weak phase for training. He finally pulls out blood drink from his cross bag and drinks it to refill his rest energy instead of waiting for natural rest. The method works, and Han explains that troll blood is concentrated rest energy, making blood drink the perfect way to train transcendent regeneration. Realizes he may be the first being to truly train transcendent regeneration this way, and Han keeps drinking while even his poison resistance and cooking skills level up. With Lita still asleep on his head and trying to control her emotions, Han pushes deeper into the dungeon and keeps carving through monsters at terrifying speed. Han tears through a great thunder bear and keeps harvesting its body as and Lita argue about how reckless he is. Warns him not to treat rare magic stones like junk, but Han only wants to stay unnoticed while he packs away the monster materials. After realizing 3 days have passed, Han prepares for another ambush just as and Lita bicker over who is actually helping. Han senses a stronger presence approaching and jokes that people should start updating dungeon information more often. A giant golden thunder bird bursts into view, and Han decides he can still use the fight to train his regeneration. Using superhuman strength and the new leap skill, Han launches himself into the air to line up a diving attack. The bird twists away, so Han uses his falling speed and weight transfer to slam the pile bunker into its body. The first hit fails to kill the monster, and its lightning vortex forces Han to back off before the bunker gets wrecked. Han retreats, swaps to the rough moonlight's bone atlatl, and admits he designed the explosive shot to go off only after it buries itself safely inside a target. When the bird forces an opening, Han takes its lightning hit head-on and hurls the spear straight through the bunker ammo. The inside shot detonates the monster from within, and the thunder bird crashes down dead as Han levels up again. Han immediately realizes his bad timing was right, because the fallen bunker is still alive with another vortex and the battle is not over yet. Han finally drops the giant thunder birds and gets a massive experience payout, but he is completely worn out after a 3-hour fight. He realizes the long-range bone atlatl saved his life, because fighting 3 lightning birds up close would have been suicide. After the fight, he is so drained that even he admits he is about to die, and Lita and push him to rest and go home. The pile bunker survives being spun through the lightning storm, but it comes back glowing and sparking in a transformed state. When he checks the weapon, it has evolved into a legend-rank thunder pile bunker with stronger lightning-based power and a painful durability penalty. He rages over the loss of durability, then vents by completely dismantling the 4 Thunderbird corpses and collecting 2 magic stones from them. With the dungeon cleared and no more business there, he only wants to go home and sleep. He goes straight home and sleeps hard, while in China a secret dungeon project quietly succeeds in opening a gate to another world. The mage and the power-hungry man celebrate the breakthrough, but the angel immediately pushes for bigger plans and more gates. The mage announces that he will cross over to Earth himself, and the man instantly realizes he has to start kidnapping women to satisfy him. The next morning, Han wakes rested, gets his mother's casual send-off, and starts preparing for China by repairing and restocking all his gear. He realizes his Thunderbird loot can be used for accessories, and Lita nudges him into making a bracelet instead of another weapon. He crafts the bracelet into a unique lightning artifact, and the finished piece carries a defensive storm option that could even satisfy Kong Mi-Ray. Confident in his new gear, he heads for Incheon Airport to stow away on a flight to China, even though the terminal is crowded with armed travelers and military personnel. He notices Colonel Yun Daehan and 2nd Lieutenant Han Yeorang in Special Forces gear and briefly considers contacting them, but his bad feeling tells him to stay away. He boards the plane unseen thanks to concealment, then realizes too late that having a passport would have made this whole thing easier. After landing, he races through a devastated Chinese city where collapsed towers and homeless survivors make him feel the weight of the catastrophe. Even though he wants to help, Lita and remind him that everyone has to survive on their own power, and he forces himself to keep moving. On the road to the dungeon, he senses something wrong and stops short when Lita warns that a concealed dungeon operation has exposed the traitor's trail. Instead of panicking, he actually feels relieved, because this time he saw the danger coming before it hit him and can move against it first. Lita explains that a hidden dungeon is being used by a traitor angel and an outsider with impossible power, and Han decides he has to go in and see what is really happening. The angels warn him that they cannot freely interfere, but Han pushes ahead anyway, saying he will scout first and kill anyone who turns out to be an enemy. He slips through a low-level slime-filled dungeon with the angels hidden by concealment, then suddenly stops when he finds 2 murdered young women on the floor. He realizes the women were abused and killed for pleasure, and that discovery snaps his patience clean in half. The hidden language skill activates as the 2 perpetrators speak, and Han hears enough to know they are calmly discussing women like disposable toys. The mage boasts about future invasion plans, the final angel steps in, and Han decides there is no more reason to wait. Han launches himself into the air and drops the pile bunker with a full weight transfer straight onto the mage's head. The strike smashes through the magic layers, kills the mage instantly, and Han levels up on the spot. The surviving human panics, but Han answers with one insult and a spear slash that cleanly takes his head off. With the fight over, the angel battle begins in earnest as Lita brutally pummels the traitor angel, while Erta keeps healing him so she can keep hitting him. Yahello tears down the gate to the other world, cutting off the connection before it can cause any more trouble. Yahello brushes off Erta's concern, saying humans are no different from monsters if they become a threat, then turns to looting the mage. The robe turns out to be a legendary black mage jacket with absurd defenses, and Yahello instantly realizes he cannot wear it himself. He finds a hidden pocket stuffed with top-class health and magic potions, grumbles that he expected gold instead, and packs them away anyway. While Lita is still beating the angel senseless, Yahello has Erta clean the victims' bodies and burns the 2 human corpses so they cannot be used for anything else. The angels finish off the traitor, and Lita proudly announces she will return after confirming the execution, sounding more like a fierce enforcer than a messenger. Yahello decides not to hunt yet, and instead carries the victims' bodies away, saying they deserve a proper burial first. Yahello tears through the Quegni dungeon so easily that the hunt starts feeling pointless instead of dangerous. By the 523rd kill, Yahello is bored enough to say he cannot keep wasting time on this. Erta explains that boss monsters are rare, and Yahello starts wondering whether this dungeon has one at all. When Yahello asks why higher-level hunters would ever enter a lower dungeon, Erta teases him with a half-answer about another world. Death Collector suddenly levels up, and the dead monster's voices slam straight into Yahello's mind. He endures the mental noise, keeps yelling at the dead in his head, and accidentally pushes Death Collector up again. Then one dead voice cuts through the chaos clearly enough for Yahello to realize a real person is talking to him. Yahello recognizes the voice as Reta Karaiche, hears her ask for revenge, and finally learns the dead can leave him a message. Back in heaven, a low-ranking angel is dragged out for punishment over the concealed dungeon, and Lita loudly pushes for execution. A stricter female angel named Spyra steps in, argues that the traitor is too dangerous to spare, and shuts down the chairman's hesitation. Spyra questions the traitor, then pierces and splits him open when he spits out one last curse against heaven. After declaring him a traitor of heaven, Spyra turns to Lita and orders her into special training for the coming battle. Yahello and Erta finally understand what Reta Karaiche meant. Dragons are not ordinary dragonkin, but much higher beings, and Dara was ruined before heaven could stop them. Reta reveals the brutal history. Monsters swarmed her continent, heaven arrived too late, and when her people were wiped out she chose the desperate path of becoming a breaker. Erta condemns the choice, but Reta explains she had one last plan. She hid her thoughts inside her robe and sighed so someone like her someday might inherit them. Yahello accepts the warning but refuses to rush into a suicide war, saying Earth is still too weak to face dragons head-on. Erta explains the real threat. The dungeon connection could worsen with the second great cataclysm, turning the sealed gate into a pathway for monsters from Daru. The countdown is horrifyingly short now. What should have taken 150 years has been compressed to about 50, and Heaven's seal only buys time. Even so, Yahello sees one practical path forward: grow stronger through Angel's support, then attack only the weak targets first, and keep the scale small. Reta offers the real advantage. She once took control of an elven worldwide magic formation that can reveal and teleport around the continent, and Yahello immediately wants in. Yahello decides to keep it private for now, saying he will handle it with the strongest help available only if it becomes impossible alone. He admits his selfish reason out loud too. Dragon skin sounds too valuable to hand to anyone else, and Reta instantly realizes she was killed by a huge pervert. Later, back in Korea, Yahello worries when Lita still has not returned, and Erta tries not to show how jealous she is. Yahello admits he likes Lita because she cherishes him without hidden motives, and Erta is thrown off when he unexpectedly thanks her too. Just as he decides to get back to work and make a weapon for the Empress, Lita suddenly returns and throws herself at him in a clingy, embarrassing reunion. Lita explains she has to prepare for advancement, then reveals that the angel behind the dungeon incident was threatened into talking, probably by a higher-level group. They still do not know who the mastermind is, so the only safe response is tighter angel patrols and stricter dungeon management. Lita and Erta briefly reflect on how much trouble Earth is in. Then Yahello learns the weird connection between Earth and Daru is what caused all this dungeon chaos in the first place. Yahello finally receives his Heaven's Quest rewards, and his stats and combat skills jump sharply, especially Leap, which now lets him make an extra mid-air jump. Lita says she will keep visiting for a few hours each day until her advancement is done, which finally puts Yahello at ease. With the crisis in mind, Yahello feeds the Eternal Flame and gets back to work, starting Kong Mirai's equipment with Quegna bones and alloyed metals. Using a third-class magic stone and everything he has learned, Yahello crafts a legendary lightning staff so strong that even Erta and Lita are stunned by the result. He keeps going without slowing down, turning more Quegna materials into extra gear and finishing a unique robe for Kong Mirai as well. When he is done, Yahello heads out to meet the Empress, confident enough to joke that she will have to pay whatever it takes for this masterpiece. Back in the same private tea room, Kong Mirai meets Yahello with her mask off and stares at the staff he made for her, already shaken by how perfect it is. She admits the weapon is beyond what she imagined and starts doubting herself, crushed by the fact that he has access to a smith who can make something this rare. Yu Ailhan insists the skill belongs to the smith, not to him. But Kong Mirai keeps pushing until he tells her he wants her to get stronger fast because Earth is too weak for what is coming. Kong Mirai bursts into awkward laughter, then suddenly accepts the deal, buys the staff for 100 billion, and declares that she will surpass him no matter what. With the first sale settled, Yu Ailhan pulls out a robe and casually offers it to, claiming it is only unique, and Kong Mirai immediately has to call in a friend because she is out of money. Na Yuna arrives in a burst of cheer, but Kong Mirai immediately pulls her aside, shuts down her teasing, and shows her the staff and robe for a quick appraisal. Na Yuna immediately wants one for herself, but Yu Ailhan tells her to bring holy stones, and she starts brainstorming ridiculous ways to pay for it, even suggesting a building as collateral. The three of them finish the deal with bank transfers and a promise of a building, and Kong Mirai even adds that tax will be handled, which leaves Yu Ailhan silently fuming while Erda tugs at his hair in annoyance. After Yu Ailhan leaves, Na Yuna teases Kong Mirai about whether this is her first love, but Kong Mirai denies it and admits she sees him as a rival she wants to surpass. Na Yuna says Yu Ailhan is interesting and worth watching, but Kong Mirai keeps her face calm while privately deciding she wants him for herself and will grow stronger until she can claim him on equal terms. Back home, Yu Ailhan is bombarded by Na Yuna's photos and building details, and he realizes she has basically wired him into her life on purpose. He hates the nuisance, but he keeps her number anyway because the building and his bigger plans make the connection too useful to throw away. The new building in Gangnam should be priceless, but Yu Ailhan only sees a fragile target that any monster could ruin in one step. He decides the real value is not the property itself, but the attention it can draw for the weapons business he wants to grow there. While he plans, Lita and Erda get excited over the building's floors, parking levels, and luxury details like they are touring a toy palace. He shuts down their embarrassing brand ideas and settles on Vanguard, a name that fits his unwilling place at the front of the battlefield. He quickly takes over the building rights, meets the tenants in his mask, and the only thing they seem to realize is that their new owner has a grade 8 syndrome. He also buys the top floor of a nearby luxury apartment, and treats the massive expense like nothing, because money means little to him compared with what he can build there. He hires a management company, stops caring about the building itself, and focuses only on the space he can personally use. The real move comes when he relocates his workshop to the 5th basement floor, and the angels help him drag everything underground. The angels boost the building's protection, and Yu Ailhan finally sees a quiet, soundproof workshop with the eternal flame burning in a bigger furnace. He starts mass-producing weapons and armor from monster byproducts, turning cheap bone and leather scraps into rare gear with absurd performance. Even he knows the pace is insane, but he keeps hammering because Earth's future is unstable and he needs to grow the right way, not the fast way. Days pass in a blur as he keeps building the whole operation around the new base, from interior work to staff to paperwork, while Lita trains and the apartment top floor gets finished. Just when he tries to rest after finishing a spear, strange green text appears in his vision, and a faraway god of smithing suddenly claims to have found him. Erda explains that these gods are not real gods but record-born egos, and that any blessing would only be more smithing records added to what he has already done. When Yu Ailhan asks about holy power, Erda brushes it off as another kind of mana and makes it clear the smithing god's blessing will not help him heal or tank like Na Yuna does. Yu Ailhan then admits the god refused to even tell him the tasks, and his anger spikes at the absurdity of being given homework without instructions. The whole thing leaves him fuming, because if the smithing god had been real, Yu Ailhan would have gone across worlds just to hit him. Vanguard opens with almost no publicity, just a plain sign in Gangnam's expensive reinforced district, and everyone who sees it thinks the owner is either reckless or hiding something. When customers finally reach the 13th floor, 2 employees greet them and the room is packed with displayed weapons that make the visitors stop cold. A hunter picks up a bastard sword and immediately realizes the balance is perfect, then freezes when the item window calls it a rare weapon with absurd attack power and a special defense cutting option. The employee casually says that weapon is only Vanguard standard, and the 2 customers can barely process that something this strong is being sold as normal stock. Even after hearing the price is 100 million won, the customers still want the weapons, but they leave helplessly because they cannot actually afford them. Once the first buyers spread the news online, Vanguard explodes across messages and SNS, with people arguing that it is fake while others rush to say the gear is real and worth the money. By closing time, the store has already sold dozens of items, and Yu Ailhan's strict rules and angelic protection keep latecomers from forcing their way in. At a round table, Kong Mirai, Kong Hajin, and Na Yuna argue over Yu Ailhan's impossible business, with Mirai torn between anger, hope, and disbelief while the others tease her. Kong Hajin tries to calm the situation and get back to clan business, and Mirai finally agrees to recruit members for the Lightning God clan even though she still looks annoyed. While the clan executives are in chaos, Yu Ailhan is deep in the world's hardest dungeon, grinding concealment kills and cursing how hard the evolution requirements are. His concealment skill still needs thousands of kills and rare materials, and Erda bluntly tells him that the only way forward is to keep hunting tougher enemies. Now that Vanguard has started changing Earth, Yahello heads to Japan's Kanto region to train in a high-level dungeon full of concealment monsters and keep pushing his skill forward. Inside, he tears through shadow monsters so fast that the kills barely leave bodies behind, which leaves him annoyed because he cannot harvest normal byproducts or cook with them. Lita offers to bring food, Yahello jokingly rejects the delivery, and the three of them fall into their usual weirdly comfortable banter while Erta checks the Vanguard buzz on his phone. Erta warns that Vanguard's success could expose Yahello's identity and put his parents at risk, but he is already counting on people like Nayuna and the Empress to protect the secret for their own reasons. He keeps hunting, and when a shadow monster appears from the floor, he spears it instantly while brushing off Erta's warning that the dungeon would be a disaster if third-class monsters ever started appearing everywhere. Lita explains that if regular third-class monsters start spawning, the dungeon's mana density has become a regional crisis, not just a local problem, and Yahello grimly jokes that Japan would need insecticide. 3 weeks later, the dungeon finally reveals its worst secret. Huge numbers of third-class shadow monsters are packed deep inside, proving Yahello's joke about the region being doomed. Yahello clears the dungeon anyway, and 2 days later he walks out at level 75 just as a massive dungeon chain break is already erupting across Kanto. A dungeon break erupts in Kanagawa and turns Japan into a panic zone as monsters flood the streets, dungeons collapse, and the first wave of defenders rush in from across the world. The cleanup line forms fast, but the fighting is brutal. Flying monsters break through toward Tokyo while Kanagawa gets shoved toward ruin to protect the cities still standing. The Lightning God clan arrives in Japan, and Kang Mi-rae takes the center position with Na Yuna behind her and Kang Ha-jin guarding the front. Kang Mi-rae unleashes chain lightning and wipes out a packed cluster of orcs in one cast, then hugs her staff like she cannot believe how much stronger it makes her. She gets competitive instead of satisfied, talking up magic power and reacting to Yahello in her head as she decides she will outshine him here. Yahello steps out into the disaster zone and laughs at how absurd the situation is, while the angels tell him to stop stalling and just take the quest. Knowing the dungeon has to be cleared before the whole disaster gets worse, Yahello draws out the rough moonlight bone atlatl and prepares to hunt under the moon. He asks for part of the reward up front, demanding extra cross-bag space and remote retrieval, then launches a spear through 2 flying monsters in one clean shot. The angels give in, and with the new cross-bag functions Yahello starts pulling back spears and monster corpses instantly while staying completely invisible to the people around him. His concealment skill evolves into Death God after he completes the kill conditions, making one-shot surprise kills keep him hidden and stacking power the longer he keeps hunting. Yahello immediately abuses the new skill, killing monster after monster so cleanly that the bodies vanish and nobody can even tell where the attacks came from. As the battlefield starts treating him like a horror story, Yahello moves to the next district and keeps clearing second-class monsters faster than anyone can follow. By dawn he has carved through about 30 districts, and the survivors start spreading the only explanation they can think of: Susanoo has descended on Japan. The rumor explodes online, and even strong clan leaders and elite hunters start realizing that an absurdly powerful unknown ally has appeared in Japan. The angels and Yahello settle into a grim partnership for the dungeon cleanup, and the true horror of the invisible spear-wielding hunter starts to spread. Erda and Lita mock Yahello by reading news articles about Susanoo, and he irritably tells them to stop while still grinding through the monster wave. His spears start wiping out monsters in one burst after another, and the battlefield crowd begins shouting that Susanoo has descended to save them. Once the high-level monsters disappear, the local fighters stop panicking and start following Yahello's lead, baiting stronger monsters toward him while clearing the weaker ones themselves. The self-styled army of Susanoo swells into a huge force, and Yahello's spear technique improves enough that the system makes his skill evolution conditions easier. By 2 in the afternoon, Yahello reaches the Tokyo border barricade and realizes the entire Kanagawa cleanup is already complete. The Tokyo defense line panics at the sight of the massive army, then quickly decides to dissolve the barricade and follow Susanoo into Tokyo before they get left behind. Among the defenders are Han Yeo-rang and Colonel Yoon Dae-han from Korea, but Yahello delays any contact because he does not want his concealment to wear off. Yahello keeps fighting through Tokyo by switching hands and using superhuman strength until he realizes he can cancel the penalty with transcendent regeneration and blood drink. His skill training pays off fast, pushing superhuman strength and transcendent regeneration up again, while the crowd starts believing Susanoo is something beyond human. When a dungeon suddenly bursts open nearby, Yahello spots the flood of monsters and decides it is the perfect chance to use his giant grenade stockpile. He hurls grenade after grenade into the swarm, instantly triggering a chain of explosions that wipes the monsters out before the defenders can even form a line. The last surviving monster is finished off, Yahello levels up, and the survivors can only stare as the whole eruption ends in less than 20 seconds. In Tokyo's next districts, Yahello keeps moving while the giant Susanoo army grows even larger, and the other clans start revealing how petty and selfish they really are. Metal Knights gets humiliated when Yahello steals their kills, and their commander Michael Smithson fumes that he will hunt Susanoo down and kill him. Yu Il-han keeps cleaning out district after district, the Susanoo army keeps swelling, and his cross bag fills with tens of thousands of monster corpses. He realizes the bag's weight is now a problem, but then immediately starts thinking of using that same weight as a pile bunker strike instead. While Yu Il-han is still thinking about that idea, the Lightning God clan tightens its formation and keeps fighting its own way through Tokyo. A warning comes from above when strange cube-shaped objects begin falling toward the clan's position, and Fata instantly realizes they are traps of destruction. The cubes activate too fast for anyone to escape, and the resulting mana surge tears through the area while monsters start gathering from everywhere. The shockwave becomes the start of a full overflow in the middle of Tokyo, turning the city center into a fresh disaster zone. A violent mana surge hits the battlefield, and the monsters all turn toward the same point as Lita and Erta realize an overflow is starting. Yu Il-han realizes someone may have forced the disaster on purpose by stacking traps of destruction in a broken dungeon zone. He decides it does not matter how strong the monster is, because if he cannot kill it, Earth will lose the battle. At the center of the overflow, a giant eight-headed, eight-tailed monster appears, and Yu Il-han laughs in disbelief at how closely it resembles Yamada no Orochi. The Orochi unleashes purple light from every mouth, wiping out monsters and humans alike and turning the whole area into a hell's cape. Lita and Erta can barely help from heaven, so they grit their teeth and decide to trust Yu Il-han and pull him out if they have to. Yu Il-han decides to lure the Orochi away from the crowd and attacks from concealment with his last powerful pile bunker shot. The shot tears through one Orochi head, breaks Yu Il-han's concealment, and finally reveals Susanoo to the shocked survivors. Yu Il-han keeps the monster's hatred on himself and sprints away at insane speed, using superhuman strength and blood drink to stay ahead. The Susanoo army wants to help, but the smaller monsters and the Orochi's power force them to protect themselves instead of chasing after him. Kang Mi-rae, Na Yu Na, and Kang Ha-jin join the defense, and Na Yu Na boldly insists that only Yu Il-han can finish the Orochi. The leaders of Metal Knights and Magia, Michael Smithson and Karina Malatesta, swallow their pride and form an alliance as the crisis stops being just a clan problem. With every faction now forced to cooperate, Kang Ha-jin screams at the front line for everyone to get into the party and fight already. Yu Il-han's diversion is starting to collapse as the enraged Orochi fires magic bullets to cut off his escape. He stops running, tells Erta to post an urgent vanguard notice, and uses the higher-ranked weapon ticket as bait to pull fighters in before more civilians die. He realizes his best attacks are barely working, because the Orochi still has 7 heads, 8 tails, and defenses too strong for his Atlotl and pile bunker to solve cleanly. When Reta Karaiche identifies the monster as Dragonkin, Yu Il-han immediately sees a real opening and pulls out the dragon-exterminating spike spear from his cross bag. He decides the fight has to become a close-range stab battle, because only a critical hit can exploit the spear's anti-Dragonkin bonus. He spots the ruined head wound as the Orochi's weak point, uses a timed leap to slip through the heads, and dives straight for the bleeding center of its body. The Orochi answers with a scale fragment counterattack, but Yu Il-han blocks the storm with a bone shield summoned through the cross bag and survives the impact. He lands on the Orochi's back, drinks blood drink, and uses transcendent regeneration while remote retrieving gear in battle like it is second nature. He locks the boots down with massive weight transfer, pinning the Orochi and turning every step into brutal damage. Even while his feet are being torn and healed in a loop, he keeps the pressure on and pushes through the Orochi's desperate tail attacks. The Orochi shifts to a crossfire of magic bullets, and Yu Il-han has to race across its back while blocking the last shot with 3 sacrificial shields. The attack nearly cooks through his gear, but Yu Il-han realizes the fight is still winnable and forces himself to keep going. With the angels cheering him on, Yu Il-han runs back in and stabs the same wound again, landing a critical hit that tears deeper into the Orochi's body. The Orochi starts adapting fast, flooding the battlefield with fiercer attacks as it seems to lock onto Yu Il-han instead of just rampaging blindly. Yu Il-han keeps himself alive with weight transfer, regeneration, blood drink, and makeshift shields, even as the Orochi burns his armor and flesh again and again. Frustrated that Yu Il-han still will not die, the Orochi changes form and shifts into a stronger purple flame pattern instead of its earlier attack style. The purple flames tear into Yu Il-han, and he barely escapes by leaping high into the air before chaining another re-leap to avoid the tail barrage. Once he gets clear, Yu Il-han realizes the Orochi dropped its magic bullets because it is afraid he might climb onto its back again. His regeneration hits level 30 and closes his worst wounds just as Yu Il-han resets his stance with the dragon-exterminating spike spear in hand. He hurls the spear through the Orochi's tails and into a wound opened by the pile bunker, shredding flesh and bones in a critical hit before recalling the weapon into the cross bag. The Orochi's changed body is now easier to tear apart, and Yu Il-han keeps exploiting that weakness by dodging its tails and landing critical throw after critical throw. The Lightning God clan arrives and can barely believe one human is holding a 4th-class monster back alone, with Kang Ha-jin especially refusing to accept what he's seeing. Kang Mi-rae decides to help finish the fight, orders the others to cover the battlefield, and prepares her own spell while Na Yuna steps forward to boost Yu Il-han instead. Na Yuna's chant lands like a miracle, supercharging Yahello's recovery and attack power, and making him realize why an angel is tied to her blessing. When the Orochi turns its tails toward Yuna, Yahello immediately intercepts the attack, proving he will not let the person who powered him up die on his watch. The boosted spear strike finally cuts one of the Orochi's tails clean off, and even Yahello is stunned that it actually worked. With the Orochi writhing, Kangmire keeps chanting through the chaos while the clan defends against the monster's new vine attack, and Yuna's buff keeps Yahello pressing forward. Yahello realizes the Orochi is only stalling for time, but he also sees a path to victory if he can protect Kangmire long enough for her spell to finish. He throws himself in front of Kangmire's side of the battlefield and smashes through another tail attack, even if it breaks his shoulder for a moment. Just when Yahello thinks he can force the win before the buff ends, the Orochi begins changing again, signaling the final phase of the showdown. The Orochi drops its flames and twists into a new form, fusing its 7 tails into one massive blade-like tail. Yahello realizes the monster has turned its tail into its main weapon, and the angels warn him that this version is even worse. The Orochi lunges, and Yahello barely escapes the sword tail strike as it carves a huge crater into the ground. Now faster than before, the Orochi presses him with a rush that can kill him from either the tail or the heads. With only a few minutes left on Yuna's buff, Yahello refuses to panic and keeps hunting for a counterattack window. More ability users and soldiers pour in, and the battlefield starts turning into a full-scale mob assault on the wounded monster. At last, Yahello senses the perfect timing and gets ready for the strike he has been waiting for. Kangmire finishes preparing a spell strong enough to pin even a 4th-class monster, and Yahello feels mana for the first time as real power. That awakening lets him read the battlefield, and he finally understands mana as possibility and power instead of just a vague concept. He launches himself upward, using his new mana control to jump beyond the Orochi's range and bait its attention away from the crowd. Hovering in midair with the spiked spear, Yahello hides his presence and makes the Orochi lose track of him completely. The gathered fighters think they can take credit, but the Orochi is already too busy being crushed by their greed and chaos. Kangmire's lightning spell lands exactly when Yahello needs it, shocking the Orochi into a fatal opening. With the monster stunned and only seconds left on the buff, Yahello hurls his spear straight down with all his remaining force. The spear pierces the Orochi's heart, and the beast dies with a single choked final sound. Experience floods in, Yahello levels up, earns Dragon Slayer, and the legendary Heavenly Cloud Gathering Sword drops from the fallen boss. The watching crowd reacts in disbelief, while Kangmire stares at the finishing line in silence, and Yuna needles her about it. Yahello drops from the sky exhausted, but he refuses to stop because the dungeon wave is still not over. Instead of celebrating, he turns away and heads for the next hunt, determined to clear Chiba before he ever lets himself rest. After finishing the Japanese dungeon wave, Yahello heads back to Korea 3 days later. Back in Seoul, Yahello finally heads home, briefly catches himself looking for his mother, then smiles at the fact that he can now move around openly. He decides to wash up and crash immediately, and Lita and Erta lightly bicker in his head about sleeping near him and who should stay by his side. After weeks of non-stop fighting and dungeon grinding, Yahello strips off his filthy gear, throws on a wash, and admits his body may be fine but his mind is wrecked. He drops onto the bed, orders Erta to wake him tomorrow morning, and instantly falls into a dead sleep so deep nothing could rouse him. Erta goes off to collect the quest rewards, and Lita stays behind, shrinking down to human size and quietly watching Yahello sleep with obvious affection. Lita hugs his arm and mutters that she wishes they could stay like this forever before falling asleep next to him too. In heaven, Erta is immediately mobbed by curious angels demanding news about Yahello, the mutant kill, and the overflow incident that nobody can trace. Erta learns the overflow was almost certainly caused by a traitor using leaked traps of destruction, and the angels still have no clue who did it. Spyra then appears and shuts down any hope of more special training for Lita, because the wall of chaos is starting to open and heaven is being pulled to a real war. Spyra explains that heaven has to focus on the front line, and Earth cannot be defended directly anymore, no matter how badly Erta wants them to intervene. Spyra says the higher-ups plan to support the humans who are actively protecting Earth, and Yahello is already their clear top choice for rewards from heaven's treasury. Spyra warns Erta to be careful with her feelings, saying love is powerful, sudden, and dangerous even for angels. When Yahello wakes after only 5 hours, his body feels completely restored, but he is annoyed that he still cannot sleep properly anymore. Lita teases him gently, and when Erta suddenly appears, Lita immediately panics because she knows the angels are about to take her away again. Erta confirms that Lita must join the battle against the predators and will advance without a test, while Erta herself is ordered to stay near Yahello. Lita calms down long enough to promise she will return quickly, kisses Yahello's cheek, and leaves after threatening Erta not to get too close while she is gone. Yahello cluelessly mistakes the angel's warning code for dating talk, and Erta awkwardly changes the subject before handing over the reward window from the dungeon wave quest. The reward is huge. Yahello gains a stack of status points, extra magic, and higher curse resistance, which leaves him uneasy about how useful it might become later. Erda reveals there is one more reward, the Hourglass of Eternity, a god-rank artifact that can freeze time inside a barrier and lock anyone else out. Yahello takes the hourglass and realizes heaven has handed him a terrifyingly perfect tool for becoming even more of a loner. Yahello realizes the god-ranked hourglass can freeze time inside a barrier and even lock out anyone he does not want in, giving him a desperate new survival trick. He immediately figures out the real catch. The artifact also lets him hide in a 2-month workshop prison, which means endless solo labor instead of freedom. Once the barrier starts, Yahello drags Erta into the frozen workshop and prepares to spend the whole stretch repairing his ruined gear. Erta points out that the workshop gear is nearly wrecked, and Yahello decides to restore it by extracting power from the orochi materials. Erta teaches him extraction, the reverse of mana crafting, and Yahello gets his first clean success by pulling an ability out of a weapon and into a magic stone. Yahello explains that his newly awakened ability to use mana makes the impossible extraction feel natural, and Erta instantly pushes him toward higher class and blacksmith training. He decides to start from the beginning by dismantling monster corpses first, and Erta is horrified when he treats the entire hall like raw material for labor. For 2 straight weeks, Yahello grinds through over 100,000 monsters, stripping them clean and feeding the waste to the eternal flame until the furnace grows stronger and turns golden. He finally reaches the orochi corpse, hauls it out piece by piece with cross-bag remote retrieval, and starts carving the giant body apart with butcher blades. The orochi proves brutally hard to separate, but Yahello keeps slicing faster, extracting usable parts and feeding the ruined remains to the flame as its byproducts change the eternal flame again. When the dismantling ends, the orochi's fused tails reveal themselves as the heavenly cloud-gathering sword, a legendary dragon-killing weapon that is strong but not nearly perfect enough for Yahello. Yahello decides not to stop at the sword and picks up his hammer, ready to melt it down and remake the lute into a spear instead. After the orochi fight, Yahello starts by stripping the options from his damaged old gear instead of rushing into new crafting. Because the orochi never dropped a 4th class stone, he uses 3rd class stones instead and pushes mana crafting up to level 33. While working the orochi skin into cloth, Yahello suddenly gets an idea about how the traps of destruction and magic stone limits fit together. He turns the orochi skin into a robe, then starts feeding its scales into the eternal flame because the monster's body seems half metal already. The heavy metal in the orochi meat ruins his dream of a dragon feast, but it also proves the corpse can be forged like metal. He spends a full day cutting, hammering, and fusing 300 scales into palm-sized pieces meant to become thrown weapons. Erta realizes too late that he is not making daggers for use as weapons, but as parts for the robe itself. He finishes 300 rare daggers, each one built to shoot out like a bullet when struck and snap back into place. Yahello then bolts all 300 daggers onto the robe and starts shaping the whole thing into a trap that can unleash a shock wave. He realizes the robe and his lightning bracelet can combo into a one-time defensive finisher, which makes Erta even more nervous. With the robe finished, he starts a second armor line, aiming for an inner layer and an outer layer this time. The inner armor comes out as a unique rank leather piece, but Yahello is annoyed that the options changed instead of improving exactly as planned. Instead of stopping there, he decides to revive his old dream and make the outer armor sharp enough for close combat too. He openly admits the design is his preference, then keeps going anyway because he wants armor that fits his own brutal fighting style. Erta can only sigh as Yahello throws himself into finishing the armor, and she quietly ends up admiring the heroism behind the madness. Yahello keeps grinding through the orochi materials, sharpening bones into blades and finishing them as rare rank set pieces. Using plenty of 2nd class magic stones, he pushes the crafting further, and some of the blades come out as unique ranked artifacts too. Erta realizes this is different from ordinary 2-item fusion, because Yahello is building separate pieces that work together as one complete set. After melting the remaining orochi bones into a black-purple metal ingot, Yahello starts forging the full plate armor piece by piece. He pours mana into the finished armor, determined to make something that can defend and counterattack at the same time. The craft succeeds, and the system reveals a legend-ranked armor loaded with huge defense, fire resistance, and hidden blades that can grow with mana. Yahello is satisfied, especially because the new fire resistance means the orochi's magic bullet pain won't happen again. Erta is shocked by how much he has learned since gaining mana, while Yahello looks ahead to the next challenge in his forge. He turns to the heavenly cloud-gathering sword next, marveling that it is harder than Harcanium, and considering whether to force it into a spear. Yahello refuses to back down, saying he is better with spears and would not be worthy of being a smith if he could not reshape it by will. The sword suddenly roars with the leftover life power inside it, and Yahello realizes it may still have another future use. 2 months pass inside the barrier in an instant, and Yahello comes out checking his phone in disbelief at how little time changed outside. Erta proudly points out what an incredible gift the Hourglass of Eternity was, even if Yahello barely seems impressed at first. He checks Vanguard and sees that the demand for his promised weapons has exploded, so he decides to sell everything fairly to every clan that helped in the dungeon wave. Yahello and Erta bicker about how he somehow used every material he had, Then he jokes that he should speed things up and handle his other contacts too. He decides to contact the Lightning God clan and then reach out to the strong overseas fighters he met in Tokyo before it is too late. Remembering Han Yeorang and Captain Yoon Daehan in their ragged gear, he decides he should not wait any longer and should contact them now. He remembers how he disguised himself to get Yoon Daehan's contact, and how quickly the two officers understood he was serious about selling equipment. He also remembers telling them he would sell weapons cheaply to the suppression, which flipped their whole impression of him. Now that he can use mana and has the Lightning God clan behind him, Yahello feels far less likely to be pushed back by the world's strongest. He checks the clock and realizes only a little more than 9 hours have passed since the dungeon wave ended, while humanity is still barely holding on. After hearing Spira's blunt advice about higher beings and lower beings, Erda grumbles about her while Yahello decides to call Yoon Daehan first. Yoon Daehan answers at once and says they are waiting for Yahello's call, making it clear they have been on alert for him the whole time. Yahello smiles and opens the conversation as business, kicking off the next stage of humanity's strengthening plan. On Vanguard's sealed 14th floor, Yahello meets Yoon Daehan for a private trade talk, only to find Han Yeorang there too and immediately wish the meeting had been smaller. Yoon Daehan haggles over suppression's order, and Yahello makes it clear that he wants Vanguard-level prices, not a cheap government handout. Yahello casually pulls out a sample longsword from his cross bag, and the two visitors are stunned by the rare weapon's absurd stats and special anti-monster bonus. Yahello refuses to discuss his smithing methods, then bluntly says he wants extra favors, protection from future interference, and direct distribution to suppression only. Han Yeorang starts mentally sizing Yahello up as perfect husband material, but he ends the lunch invite by saying he already has plans to meet Kong Mire. A little later, Kong Mire, Kong Hajin, and Na Yuna arrive at the 14th floor, and Yahello serves them coffee while the room turns into another tense but familiar business meeting. Kong Mire confirms the higher-ranked gear will go on sale next week, and Yahello draws a hard line that no one should get equipment beyond what they can actually handle. Yahello tells Kong Hajin and Na Yuna to bring out the holy power material now, because they need proper artifacts of their own. Na Yuna proudly produces 3 holy stones of the goddess of beauty, Ladna, and Yahello instantly recognizes that she has brought an incredibly precious divine material. Kong Hajin explains that the holy stones should be ground up and used as finishing material, and Yahello immediately agrees to start the request at once. Before leaving, Kong Mire admits the Tokyo Orochi fight taught her a lot and promises she will come back stronger, even if it takes time. Na Yuna refuses to leave with the others and keeps trying to stay behind for a private talk, forcing Kong Mire to glare and threaten her with lightning. Yahello lets the others leave first, and tells them he will throw Na Yuna out later if necessary, which finally gets the room cleared. Alone with Yahello, Na Yuna finally admits that everything he sold and forged was his doing, then tries to turn that into a negotiating advantage. She tries to bargain for dropping polite speech between them, but Yahello brushes her off with the blunt reminder that she hides herself for the same reason he does. Na Yuna escalates to a bold friendship proposal that could become something more later, but Yahello immediately says no and leaves her flustered. Yahello finally says outright that he dislikes Na Yuna herself, not just her personality, and her first real defeat comes when even her usual confidence can't recover. After Japan's crisis ends, the world latches onto 3 big stories: the sudden rise of clans, Vanguard's booming weapons sales, and the mystery of Susanoo. The Lightning God clan, Magia, and Metal Knights become the hottest names, while weaker clans grumble that the strong are pulling all the attention. Vanguard's low-priced standard items keep moving fast, and the warehouse stock is already shrinking under the new demand. Susanoo becomes the newest obsession, and people start arguing over whether he is a god, a human, or a prize they can claim. Yahello brushes off the internet talk, tells Erda to stop reading it, and gets his office ready for the clan masters. The clan masters arrive on the 14th floor and immediately realize the supposed deputy is a very dangerous-looking young man. Yahello makes them enter all at once, and the room fills with 27 clan leaders trying not to provoke him. When the Phoenix clan master starts complaining in French, Yahello answers in kind and snaps the chair leg with a flying pen. Yahello flatly refuses to trade with the Phoenix clan master and tells him to get lost, so the others drag the man out before the meeting explodes. Once all the guests are finally seated, Yahello introduces himself as the president of Vanguard and refuses to answer basic trade questions. Takagaki Asuha worries about Vanguard staying independent, but Yahello says the shop is protected and he is ready to defend himself. The other clan masters rush to offer support, partly because they want his weapons, and Yahello quietly enjoys how much leverage he has gained. Yahello reveals the sale lineup: 10 higher rank sets, each with a weapon and armor or accessory, plus 30 standard sets for larger clans. The accessory option shocks them most, and Yahello casually drops the real reveal that the crafter's mana crafting level is over 30. Most clans decide they need the standard sets too, while the smaller elite-focused groups hold back and weigh their options. When Yahello says all the higher-ranked weapons are unique grade, the room nearly explodes as the clans realize how absurd the deal is. Takagaki Asuha tests the first sample and immediately falls for the whip, while the others crowd in to inspect the rest of the gear. Kang Mirai wants the accessory she notices too late, and the whole room turns from admiration to panic over the price. Yu Ailhan names the price at $5 million per higher-ranked weapon, and the clans are stunned by how cheap he is being. He ends the meeting with one cold choice: buy the gear or leave, and nobody dares stand up. Vanguard's reputation keeps climbing as its better weapons and trade deals make both clans and the military look stronger overnight. Suppression goes from miserable to lucky after getting Vanguard gear, and the soldiers' growth and survivability improve fast enough to shut up a lot of complaints. Han Yeorang gets embarrassingly intense about winning Yu Ailhan over, turning the serious atmosphere into awkward romantic chaos. While the world keeps changing, babies born after the Great Cataclysm settle into Earth, and governments start rebuilding important places with much tougher materials. After Japan's dungeon wave, dungeon control becomes a worldwide pressure point, and the clans with Vanguard equipment surge ahead of the rest. Yu Ailhan's warning against stealing Vanguard weapons keeps the bickering clans in line, and gives him leverage over them all. Erda drags Yu Ailhan away from the laptop, and he admits the whole Vanguard project only mattered if humanity could actually grow from it. He spends weeks forging gear for the Lightning God clan and the other clans, then grumbles that level 87 still crawls compared with the Orochi experience burst. Yu Ailhan decides he has done everything he can on Earth for now, and starts talking about the only real way left to grow. His mana control has improved enough to strengthen skills and use concealment freely, and both Erda and Reda Karaich are visibly stunned by how fast he adapted. Reda Karaich becomes clearer and more helpful after feeding on some of the life force Yu Ailhan collected, and he quietly realizes she may become a real support in the future. When Reda Karaich openly says she wants to help him, Yu Ailhan treats it like proof that his gamble paid off. He asks whether Death God powers can really do that, and Reda Karaich answers that the real payoff will come once she reaches his 3rd class. Reda Karaich gets competitive about being more useful than Orochi, but Yu Ailhan only has to glance over when Orochi's body starts making noise again. Yu Ailhan refuses to waste Orochi's rare thought and life force value, then mentally shifts to the next step, leaving Earth for Daru. He has already secured the Lightning God clan for his parents and stocked Vanguard for the future, so he finally decides to move before the next disaster can catch him waiting. Yu Ailhan heads back to the Grand Canyon, where tourists wander the stabilized landscape completely unaware of him. The Daru dungeon remains sealed by Heaven's power, so Yu Ailhan and Erda have to consider entering and exiting through a carefully approved dog hole. Erda warns that any dragonkin escaping would trigger another dungeon break, but Yu Ailhan brushes that off as something he will deal with after wiping out most of Daru anyway. He calmly predicts the trip will start at 3rd class, turn into brutal 4th class dragon battles, and somehow end with a 5th class dragon showing up at the worst possible moment. Even as he lays out that nightmare scenario, Yu Ailhan stays weirdly energized because he can always run if the final dragon is too much. The dungeon entrance permission finally comes through, and Yu Ailhan, Erda, and Reda Karaich head into Daru without hesitation. Inside Daru, Yu Ailhan sees the sky turn even darker and realizes the dungeon is sinking harder as he rushes toward the core with Reda's directions. He bites into a blood-ring packet mid-sprint and surges forward with mana-fueled speed, using his stacked accessories and regeneration support to stay in top condition. Reda confirms the formation is still intact, then drops the terrifying scale of the enemy force. Tens of thousands of dragonkin, and over 1,000 4th-class monsters. With the odds exposed, Yu Ailhan stops thinking like a tourist and decides to hunt fast, slip into guerrilla tactics if needed, and kill as many as he can before they notice him. The formation sends him into the deepest ruined area, where ghostly undead voices echo through the dark, and Reda reveals that these are the souls of people trapped when the world fell. Yu Ailhan accepts that he has to put them to rest and starts grinding ghosts for experience, only to discover they give terrible returns and almost nothing useful. A week later he has only reached level 90, and the wasted time pushes him to give up on ghosts and move on to dragon hunting. Erda's strict training finally pays off, and Yu Ailhan becomes fully comfortable using Angel's partner, Angel's support, and a full-power single strike that can borrow her strength without exhausting her. He pays the magic formation's cost with piles of 2nd-class stones, then chooses to go after the dragonkin first and have Reda send him straight to the kill zone. The teleport drops him right in front of a sleeping 3rd-class dragonkin, and Yu Ailhan immediately goes for a concealed spear ambush to start his world hunt. A month into the hunt, Yu Ailhan is level 99 and still killing dragonkin one by one, using the black bone giant spear and purple flame to pierce their weak points in a single strike. When the nearby dragonkin panic and blast flame everywhere, Yu Ailhan keeps moving through the fire thanks to his resistance gear and reflects their own attacks back into their faces. Yu Ailhan tears through the cavern like a disaster, and Erda can only watch, half impressed and half disturbed, as he keeps slaughtering monsters without losing his concealment. At last the cavern falls silent, and Yu Ailhan finally sees the reward for a month of grinding, enough experience to unlock his 3rd-class path. The system tells him he cannot reach level 100 until he chooses a class, and 3 options appear before him: Reaper, God's Hammer, and Blazing Reaper. 10 days after hitting level 99, Yahello finally faces the brutal third-class advancement choice and starts weighing the new class options with Erda. He rejects Reaper and God's Hammer, deciding that neither one fits his battle style or his concealment-heavy fighting. Erda pushes him toward Blazing Reaper, and Yahello realizes his fire-linked gear, Eternal Flame, and smithing history have all piled up into that path. Yahello chooses Blazing Reaper without hesitation, then gets slammed with a ridiculous time attack quest that demands 10,000 third-class and 1,000 fourth-class kills in 4 weeks. He takes the nightmare requirements in stride, decides to keep hunting, and prepares to burn through Bloodrink instead of sleep. Retta suddenly stops him with shocking news. Her search has found possible elf survivors near the nearest Dragonkin den. After confirming how Retta's search works, Yahello agrees to check the survivors now, even though he warns this will be the only time he helps before the quest takes priority again. They arrive in a dark, cramped cavern full of sleeping Dragonkin, and Yahello immediately understands why the den is perfect for an ambush and miserable for a fight. He strikes first with Purple Flame, spearing one lesser dragon out of its sleep before the others can fully wake up. The awakened Dragonkin drag themselves upright at a painfully slow pace, and Yahello is disgusted to realize they actually speak in that drawn-out dragon tongue. When the Dragonkin start babbling about invasion and the lords, Yahello gives up on hearing them out and decides to kill them first and ask questions later. He finishes off the first lesser dragon with relentless critical strikes, earning a huge burst of experience and the record for a level 181 kill. Erda warns that the remaining Dragonkin may use magic, but Yahello already knows the drill and slips back into concealment before striking again. Thanks to Dara's dense mana, Yahello's concealment gets even stronger, and he begins tearing through the den so fast the whole cave starts to look helpless. In just 11 minutes, Yahello wipes out the entire Dragonkin group, proving again that even a heavily defended den is just another hunting ground for him. After wiping out the Dragonkin in the cave, Yahello drags the bodies aside and checks the burns on his cheeks and the frost on his shoulders. He decides he should start preparing element-specific armor too, since his future enemies will not all fight the same way. Yahello jokes about making dragon blood into something even better than Bloodrink, and Erda immediately warns him that it might poison his life instead. When Retta quietly regrets that she could not save Dara with power like his, Yahello chooses the one answer that finally comforts her, and says they should go meet the elf survivors. Retta regains hope, and the three of them leave the cavern and race across Dara's huge mountains and forests toward the hidden elves. Retta guides him to the hiding place, and Yahello senses the elf settlement tucked inside hollowed-out trees before he even lands. He drops into the tree village, shuts off his concealment, and the 13 starving elves instantly panic and try to flee. Yahello catches them one by one and forces the situation shut in seconds, even while Erda complains that his lines sound completely villainous. The elves are so shaken that they think he is a dragon in disguise, but his mention of Retta Kar Iha makes them freeze in disbelief. Yahello reveals that Retta is with him in thought, and the elves finally accept that he really is a human acting on her request. When they explain that the Garden of Sunset hid them, Erda identifies the group as strange higher beings that meddle from above, which only makes Yahello more uneasy. The elves reveal the shocking truth: Dragonkin living nearby had been ordered by the Garden of Sunset to hide and protect them. Yahello realizes he has already killed those Dragonkin, but he refuses to regret it because he cannot afford to second-guess every monster he meets. He decides the Garden of Sunset can stay mysterious for now, tells the elves to keep hiding, and warns them that he will kill anyone who reveals they saw him. Retta asks him to keep going for the sake of the surviving elves, and Yahello agrees without hesitation before setting off again with Erda and Retta behind him. For the next 17 days, Yahello keeps hunting Dragonkin so smoothly that neither the monsters nor the magic formation ever catch him, and then he finally finishes the 10,000 kills needed for class advancement. With the quest complete, Yahello finally turns his attention to the 4th-class Dragonkin waiting ahead. Yahello stares down the new quest limit and realizes he has to kill 1,000 Dragonkin in 11 days, which means he has to average about 100 a day. Retta tries to steady him by pointing out that most of the Dare dragons are only around level 200, but Yahello still feels the pressure because some are much stronger. Yahello forces himself to move on, activates the formation, and uses 2 third-class magic stones to begin the hunt, while saving the lower-grade stones for Vanguard gear. He arrives in broad daylight on Daru and immediately spots a huge 4th-class Dragonkin sleeping in the open, its massive red-scaled body filling half the landscape. The Dragonkin senses a faint mana ripple, but Yahello's concealment still hides him perfectly, and the arrogant beast settles back down instead of staying alert. Erda panics when she sees Yahello going in with only one spear, but he refuses to waste time setting traps because he has to keep the kills fast. He bursts forward with stacked buffs, using his max spear skills, the cross bag's terrifying weight transfer, and a surprise leap that sends him rocketing through the air. His opening strike lands cleanly on the Dragonkin's head, smashing through the defensive membranes and driving purple flame into the wound. Yahello escapes the first counter beam with Releap, then charges straight back in before the dragon can finish speaking. The Dragonkin unleashes more light beam magic, but Yu Han pulls out rows of Orochi bone shields to remote collection and turns the attack into a moving fortress fight. Yu Han insults the dragon while pressing the wound harder, healing with blood rink, and stabbing into the same weak point again and again. The dragon tries to overwhelm him with magic from every direction, but Yu Han keeps moving, blocks what he can, and keeps hammering the skull until the beast finally collapses. Yu Han kills the 4th class dragonkin and gains a massive experience reward, but he immediately lies on its body, thinking only that he still needs to get faster. Erda and Retta are stunned by how casually he fought, while Yu Han brushes it off and starts counting the damage to his shields. He finds that 72 shields are ruined, realizes he only has 1,000 total, and starts looking for a faster, safer way to hunt the next dragon. When he checks the corpse, he finds a 4th class magic stone, and the hidden condition for spear mastery evolution suddenly appears in front of him. Yu Han realizes the unexpected hook. If he can keep going like this, he may actually finish the mission after all. Yu Han realizes he had ignored spear mastery evolution for no good reason, then sees the completed requirements, and feels relieved that the only thing missing was a 4th class magic stone. He admits to himself that he had turned impossible conditions into a mental excuse, then decides he can no longer afford to ignore his own skills and belongings. Yu Han checks his max skills and discovers that throwing is the only one besides spear mastery that still has a growth path, but its fusion evolution looks far harder than he expected. He confirms that spear mastery is ready, takes a deep breath, and activates the evolution as his stored magic stones burst into blinding light. The Akashic record marks him as the quickest and rewards his accumulated records. Then Spear Master evolves into a higher form as his past training and battles are absorbed into the change. He learns Spear of Undrawable Trajectory, a skill so tied to his own records that it feels like part of his body, and the system also lowers the difficulty for reaching 5th class. Even after the light fades, Yu Han keeps his eyes closed and practices with his spear until he starts to understand the strange new rhythm by feel alone. After hours of practice, he finally cuts down a nearby tree with a diagonal strike that Erda and Retta cannot even follow with their eyes. Yu Han explains that the new skill hides the trajectory itself, but the technique drains so much mana that he immediately has to think about improving his magic stat too. He drinks a mana potion from his cross bag, instantly refills his mana, and tells Retta that they can hunt faster now. Retta activates the magic formation again, and the next sleeping 4th class dragon becomes another easy target as Yu Han's hunt speed rises even more. As the dragon count drops past 800 and the remaining prey shrinks toward 200, the rulers of Darrow are finally being hunted down at full speed by one loner. Yu Han's new spear art tears through a retreating dragon, hiding the real strike until the beast is already fatally exposed. With concealment hiding his body too, Yu Han turns the battlefield into a trap the dragon can't read at all. The dragon drops dead, and Yu Han is rewarded with a huge burst of experience and a stronger spear of undrawable trajectory. 2 days into the new skill, Yu Han finally feels stable enough with it in real combat. When a 4th class magic stone doesn't drop, Erda explains that dragon bodies are better artifact material than stone sources. That pushes Yu Han to dream bigger, because a dragon heart would be even rarer and stronger than a normal magic stone. He refuses to waste the chance and decides to chase the next skill evolution instead of stopping to rest. He switches to throwing, realizing it can be evolved just by landing the final blow with a throw. After grinding through the kill counts, Yu Han triggers the fusion evolution and immediately unlocks absolute accuracy. The new skill feels almost mythical, letting him pour mana into a guaranteed hit like a living Gungnir. With spear mastery, concealment, and the new accuracy boost working together, Yu Han starts shredding dragons even faster. A week later, most of the level 200 range dragons are gone, and the survivors finally realize someone is hunting them down. The dragons panic and regroup, and Yu Han chooses to keep moving before they can surround him. He refuses to run for long, because every dragon that gathers makes the next fight worse if he hesitates. While he keeps hunting the lone ones, the mission timer shrinks and the number left to kill becomes terrifyingly small. Then a transfer lands him in front of a sleeping golden-scaled dragon, and the danger suddenly changes shape. At the Wall of Chaos, Liara is itching to see Yu Han just as a new invasion alarm cuts through the base. She takes the call immediately and races for the portal as a one-angel strike force. When she hears how many predators are attacking, she charges anyway without hesitation. West 47 opens before her, and she blasts apart the first wave before the angels can even hold the line. The enemy commander recognizes her and quickly realizes her reputation is well earned. Liara answers their taunts with even stronger light, and the attackers start collapsing in droves. She converts that power into heaven's energy and drills straight through the enemy front line. Only one 6th class predator keeps her attention, and even he starts sweating as he talks too much. When he mentions the Forgotten Millennium and Yu Han, Liara's anger finally spikes. He reveals that his real trick is movement, not close combat, and drags her beyond the Wall of Chaos. Surrounded now, Liara learns Yu Han is already in enemy hands and that the dragons of Darrow are being controlled too. She pretends to surrender, then rips off her gauntlets and detonates the trap with a hidden critical hit. Even shaken and outnumbered, she swears Yahello won't be taken and prepares one last spear to keep fighting. Elsewhere, Yahello decides to hear the dragon out after Urta and Retta point out that the elves and the Garden of Sunset may matter. He brings out an Orochi bone pillar and harpoon trap, locks the dragon down, and wakes her with a perfectly rude greeting. The dragon speaks fluent Earth English and desperately explains that the desertion demon army ordered Daru's conquest, and is now targeting Earth too. Now that the enemy name is real, Yahello decides the story is worth hearing and keeps the dragon talking. The golden dragon explains that the Garden of Sunset first tried to protect the elves from the destruction demon army, but Earth's connection to Daru changed everything. Once Earth became linked to Daru, the Garden of Sunset saw Yahello as a new variable and decided they needed his help against the dragons. Urta refuses to trust the dragon's noble speech, but Retta quietly thinks the alliance is reasonable if the facts hold. The dragon offers a simple condition: cooperate until the destruction demon army's dragons are wiped out, and do not touch the elves. Yahello accepts, even saying he has no reason to hurt the elves unless they turn on him first. With the alliance sealed, he asks which dragons are allied now, and the answer is blunt: party up with her if he wants to know. Yahello takes the claw, enters the party, and instantly gets the dragon's ally title with a damage reduction against Dragonkin. He learns the party is huge, mostly made of third-class Dragonkin, and the dragon admits the ones who disliked the destruction demon army were the first to die. Yahello refuses to fight beside the party and chooses to hunt alone, because grouping up would slow his kills and delay his class advancement. He explains that splitting up is safer and more efficient, and the dragon calls him a dragon-like man as an insult that sounds half like praise. Before leaving, the dragon finally introduces herself as Lysidna, and Yahello gives his name back. Retta triggers the formation to transfer them, but the spell lands Yahello back in the middle of an allied dragon by mistake. He gets shoved through the formation again and again before finally landing a valid target, killing the 958th fourth-class dragon and cutting the count to 42 left. After a blood drink refill, Yahello decides not to waste the hourglass of eternity yet and asks for the smallest hunting group instead. Retta says a group of 5 is the minimum, and Yahello heads out for a lonely fight that will still be painfully outnumbered. The transfer drops him at a bright seaside island, which only makes him grumble that the beach has nothing to do with his life. Urta needles him, and he jokes that the only nearby landmark he knows is the place where he killed the Moby Dick. Spotting dragons in the air, Yahello leaps straight up toward them, ignoring their alarm magic because his concealment still holds. The group dragons panic about a lone human making them fear him, and one angry dragon dives toward the sea to stir up trouble. Yahello spears the diving dragon through the sea with a critical hit, turning the water red and forcing the others to finally notice him. The dragons unleash a messy swarm of attacks, but Yahello re-leaps, dives through the barrage, and targets the same wounded dragon again. He remotely retrieves his spear mid-fight, drives it back into the same weak point, and ignores the dragon's terrible teamwork as they nearly hit each other instead of him. A second critical strike levels the dragon's head, the beast dies, and Yahello's skill grows stronger as the kill counter drops to 959. Yahello smirks at the shaken dragons and dares them to keep coming, even though he's already planning to run if the fight turns bad. Yahello weathers the dragon's fire magic, uses their overconfidence against them, and slips into the air again while his leap skill sharpens under pressure. He spots a wounded dragon, crashes through its defenses with raw strength and concealment, and pins it hard enough to drag it out of the sky. When he realizes the dragons have orders not to kill him, Yahello turns that fear into leverage and finishes the falling dragon with a clean finishing strike. One berserk dragon dives at him, but Yahello blindsides it with an unseen spear throw, then uses purple flame and a brutal weight transfer drop to kill it on the spot. Before the other dragons can recover, Yahello leaps high again and realizes the real problem is no longer a duel at all, but a full airborne swarm closing in. Yahello refuses to panic, keeps killing as he falls, and decides that if the enemy is going to overwhelm him, he will use the Hourglass of Eternity barrier to turn the whole battlefield into his workshop. Inside the frozen barrier, Yahello collapses, drinks blood drink to recover, and immediately starts blacksmithing with the Eternal Flame replaced by Purple Flame. He repairs his armor, sharpens his spear, and calmly explains that he has all the time in the world even while a dragon is still yelling outside the barrier. He accepts that the 4th-class dragon corpses are his raw material now and begins dismantling them at terrifying speed. When the dismantling ends, he is disappointed by the poor heart drop rate but still gathers the dragon hearts and magic stones for later use. Time keeps moving, and Yahello turns the dragon bones and leather into thousands of shields, including 5 rare legend rank ones that all look annoyingly similar. Yahello gambles on a 4th-class magic stone, fuses the 5 legend shields together, and unexpectedly creates a single living artifact called Aegis. He tests the new shield and realizes it can move on its own with mana, giving him a real extra life for the battles still ahead.